Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. Pirates, God Level Collection, leading Luffy to become the king. Chapter 21. Where's Zhangao? Sha Chen had one collection time left, and he planned to use it up directly and use it on Zhangao. But he didn't find it in the living room, and Melly said that he had locked him in the basement. Then Sha Chen asked the other party to take him there. Melly looked at Kaya, and the latter agreed, so he led the way in front. When Sha Chen arrived at the basement, Zhangao had already woken up, tied up with iron chains, and the brown glasses had long been tattered, but he still wore them neatly. "Aren't you a pirate, evildoer Sha Chen?" Sha Chen was stunned when he heard this. He had only met Zhangao before, and he killed him in an instant. Now think about it, the other party seemed to have something to say at that time. Evildoer, Sha Chen muttered to himself, what did he think of? The big pirate in the East China Sea, the evildoer Sha Chen, the bounty is 50 million Baileys, Zhangao said. Sha Chen really didn't know about this. He looked at Melly, who shook his head and said that even in the kingdom of Goa, their place was relatively remote, so newspapers were only delivered once a week. Coincidentally, new newspapers will be delivered tomorrow. 50 million, really generous, but I don't like the name of villain. Sha Chen winked at Melly and asked him to go out. After the other party closed the door, he put his hand on Zhangao's head. The other party did not resist at all, and it seemed that he had accepted his ending. But what did the question he asked before mean? Collection successful, congratulations to the host for obtaining the skill hypnosis. A halo without any special effects appeared in front of Sha Chen. He put these things and the physical and mental qualities he had drawn before into the item warehouse. The warehouse is magical. Whether it is real or virtual, it can be stored. The only pity is that there are only 10 grids. Fortunately, a new set was synthesized before, otherwise this grid might not be enough. Zhangao's back arched involuntarily, his mouth opened wide and his eyes rolled back. At this moment, he felt that his soul was missing a piece, and something was pulled out of his body. While waiting for the pain to gradually dissipate, his consciousness and confusion suddenly felt cold on his face. He woke up slowly, water drops from the ends of his hair, and saw Sha Chen sitting in front of him. What do you mean by that just now? Hoo, just now, he was panting for a long time and lowered his head. He discovered a terrifying thing. Obviously, he had a rich memory and technology of hypnosis, but his heart was empty. He vaguely knew that his hypnosis effect was not as outstanding as before. What exactly is Sha Chen capable of? Since you are a pirate, why do you protect those ordinary people? Zhangao repeated at this time. At the beginning, he was not a bad person, otherwise he would not have fainted from hunger in the mountains. But later, in order to survive, he was forced to become a pirate, and in fact, he gradually got used to this identity. But when the time came, he wanted to be more straightforward. And Sha Chen, no, their entire pirate group, had a feeling that they were out of tune with this world. Because he had a unique hypnotic ability and was very sensitive. Pirates, of course, must be free. If even the choices are made by others for you, then what kind of pirate are you? Sha Chen said. In fact, Sha Chen, who had read the original work, could not stand some things. Even if Zhangao had experienced hardships in the past, his hands must have been stained with many lives now. The notoriety of the Black Cat pirates is well known in the East China Sea. Although their captain, Beiji Crow, only has a bounty of 16 million. But this should be deliberately done by the Navy, otherwise he would not have been promoted to colonel immediately after being defeated by Monka, although he was only a colonel of the branch. But it is also an important level jump within the Navy, and he was promoted several levels in a row, and the next level is a general officer. It must be that the Black Cat pirates of Beiji Crow have done too many evil things, but considering the special nature of the East China Sea, they can't set the bounty too high. Instead, the bounty was set at 50 million Baileys for the first time, which surprised Sha Chen. It seems that the accidental killing of Colonel Monka has indeed challenged the bottom line of the Navy. To be frank, after the previous pirate King Galdi Roger was executed in Roger Town, the East China Sea has the reputation of the weakest sea because it has always been used as a template. Now there is a big pirate with 50 million, which has caused a sensation and influence which is absolutely unimaginable. However, This also reminded Sha Chen that he can't stay in the East China Sea for a long time. Originally, he thought that his wanted order would have to wait until the end of Kokoja village to be issued, but he didn't expect it to appear so soon. As for Zhang, a glimmer of enlightenment flashed in his eyes. For some reason, he suddenly burst into tears, which confused Sha Chen. He didn't have the ability to read minds, nor did he have the heart to explore the psychological journey of a scumbag. He moved his palm lightly and broke his neck. If there is one less evil person, there will not be one more good person in the world, but ordinary people will definitely live better. In fact, if Zhang is kept and collected slowly from him, it will be more useful to Sha Chen, but after listening to Zhang's words, a strong sense of crisis lingered in his heart, making him eager to leave. He returned to the hall. Luffy and Zoro were still eating and drinking. Kaya, the enemy has been dealt with. When will our ship be ready? Although this was not the first time that Sha Chen called her name directly, Kaya was still a little uncomfortable. Mary next to her replied, because of Mr. Luffy's request, the largest and highest level 3-masted pirate ship that our Chamber of Commerce can currently produce will take at least another month. No, it's too slow. Don't you have a ready-made ship? Sha Chen asked. Zoro and Nami both looked at Sha Chen. They didn't know what happened, but seeing that the other party's face was very solemn at this time, they consciously didn't ask more questions. As for Luffy, ignore him. Yes, there is, but this ship was designed by your captain himself, so even if there is a ready-made one to be modified, it will take at least 7 days. Mary re-estimated. 7 days is still too long. Kaya suddenly thought of something, and said to Melly, I remember the ship prepared for Usopp, is it coming soon? Ah, me, Usopp, who had been staying in the corner of the hall like a little transparent, suddenly jumped up excitedly. He had never heard of this. Kaya smiled softly, Usopp, I have heard from your story that what you yearn for most is the sea, so you have always wanted to be a real pirate, right? Without Kaya, actually accompanying you is Usopp. For some reason, Kaya's tone suddenly increased, and then she glanced at Sha Chen as if nothing had happened. The other party looked thoughtful, and I don't know what he was thinking. Then she continued, how can dreams be tied down by these insignificant things? Don't give up easily, Usopp. Usopp nodded heavily as if he had been injected with chicken blood. You're right, Kaya, but I don't have any money. Even though Usopp was thick-skinned, he didn't dare look directly at Kaya at this time. It's okay, this is what I should do, but Usopp this time. Fate is really unpredictable, then let's take this one, Miss Kaya. Sha Chen interrupted the two of them. Is this okay, Mr. Sha Chen, this is just a sloop. Yes, maybe this is fate, then please arrange it for us, it would be best if we can set off before noon tomorrow. This, although there is a solution, Kaya suddenly felt a little disappointed. Wait a minute, Sha Chen, this is the boat Kaya prepared for me, why do you do that? Usopp reacted very strongly, but Sha Chen just glanced at him coldly, and the latter immediately shut up. He went back to his previous inconspicuous corner and muttered to himself, Sha Chen was not in the mood to care about him. No matter what Usopp's fans or Usopp fans think, Sha Chen's impression of him is not very good. If Usopp had not faced the more than 20 ferocious pirates alone before, his courage was commendable, which made him slightly change his impression, Sha Chen probably wouldn't even look at him. After all, what he hates most is people who take lies as daily life. In his last life, he was tricked by that ex-girlfriend, and pushed into the sea, drowning alive. I don't know if there is still a chance for revenge. Unintentionally, he released a very compelling murderous aura, and everyone present, except Zoro and Luffy, had goosebumps. Even Luffy stopped temporarily, glanced at Sha Chen, and then continued to eat. Don't worry, Mr. Sha Chen, I will arrange it immediately. Mary said. Sha Chen nodded, asked for a room for them, and said he would go to rest for a while, and he had to hurry up to absorb the harvest tonight. Early the next morning, Sha Chen and his party were eating breakfast in the restaurant, and they would set off after eating. However, those people looked at him with strange faces, and even Nami, who had been sticking to him these days, sat next to Kaya, 3 seats away from him. Look at me and eat quickly. Zoro frowned. Why did Sha Chen have a new feeling after not seeing him all night, a feeling that only appeared when he stimulated his ghost energy? But isn't ghost energy a talent? How could Sha Chen have this? Did the old man named Kozaburo lie to him? Luffy didn't think too much about it. He always felt that this aura on Sha Chen was very familiar. He had felt it on Shanks at that time, but it was not so similar. He didn't think about it anymore and continued to eat. There was no way to go to the sea. He was so full every day. His deputy captain was really too lazy. He asked him to make something delicious, but he always pushed it back and forth. He really had to find a cook, and he had to find one soon. Sha Chen was really helpless. His current spiritual attribute has reached 637.2 points, but his physical fitness is only 227.3 points. This nearly threefold gap makes it feel that the body can't contain the spirit. In the past, it was just that the body was too strong and the spirit couldn't keep up, which was not so obvious, but now his free and unrestrained momentum is indeed difficult to contain. That is, in this special world of One Piece, and Sha Chen had previously obtained the seeds of domineering from Kobe. Otherwise, even if the mental power is strong, it may not be possible for everyone to have such a feeling. Although it is just a guess, Sha Chen thinks this should be the prototype of the domineering color. Sha Chen has never hesitated about awakening the domineering color. If you can't reach the top with the plug-in, it is simply a shame for the time traveler. After that, they saw the single-masted, caravel sailing ship at the dock. When Sha Chen saw it, he secretly said that it was indeed true. It was the Golden Mary in the original work. So small. Luffy has always wanted to have a ship of his own. Although it was only a few days, Sha Chen has already spoiled his taste. Unlike the original work, they were in a small boat from the beginning, and even for a period of time, they could only drift in a rubber barrel. In that case, when they met the Golden Mary, they would naturally be full of joy. Nami, who was standing next to them, was unhappy when she heard it. This was Kaya's heart, and they were still here. What kind of mentality did you have to say such a thing? Bang! She punched Luffy without hesitation, making him groan. Of course, the most important thing is that this ship didn't cost money. Then Nami hurriedly apologized to Kaya. Mary, who shook his head gently and said it didn't matter. Her eyes were always on Sha Chen. But she found that Sha Chen looked very emotional and kept staring at the cute sheep head on the bow. Because of her physical condition, Kaya couldn't go to sea. But Kaya also yearned for the sea, so he entrusted some of his wishes to Usopp. I hope he can make a name for himself in the ocean, so that I will feel happy and proud when I see the news. But it's not as good as becoming Sha Chen and his ship. His only hope now is that this ship can help Sha Chen go further. Fortunately, when Sha Chen saw the ship, he did not show disgust, which made Kaya very happy, and even Mary was relieved. If you don't like the name of the ship, you can always, as a butler who has served Kaya's family for a lifetime, he naturally understands some of his lady's thoughts, so he also accompanies Kaya in other ways. But now is different from the past. As soon as he opened his mouth, Luffy said, "This name is very good, gold, pirates go to sea, isn't it, chasing treasures and dreams?" While speaking, he stood up from the ground, pressed his straw hat with one hand, and jumped directly onto the deck. Little ones. Here, Captain. Sha Chen and others immediately stood up straight, and even Kaya and the others were sympathized. Raise the sails and set off. Yes, Captain. Sha Chen and the other two boarded the ship. Sha Chen rolled up a stream of water and hung the pirate flag of the Straw Hat Pirates on the top of the mast. Nami walked to the central rudder, and Zoro was collecting the anchor. Under the gaze of several people, Kaya threw the rum bottle that had been prepared long ago heavily on the neck of the sheephead, and the sailing ceremony was completed. Seeing that the Straw Hat Pirates were about to turn around and sail to the sea, Usopp, carrying a big package, suddenly ran down from the ridge. Wait a minute, wait a minute. Sha Chen and the others looked at it, and except for Sha Chen, they all looked puzzled, because he had long discovered that Usopp was hiding behind the ridge. Please let me join your pirate group. Usopp stood on the dock and bent down to ask. Sha Chen pursed his lips and said nothing. Zoro glanced at Sha Chen, and seeing that the other party did not express an opinion, he also remained silent. Nami said nothing. She had a general feeling towards Usopp, and she was still struggling and tangled in her heart. But Kaya and Mary looked at the four people on the boat nervously. They wanted Usopp to go with them, but they didn't want them to go with them. After all, Sha Chen's trip was destined to stir up a storm, and the risk factor was too high. They were worried that Usopp's strength could not keep up. But from another perspective, Usopp could only make a name for himself faster on such a ship. After all, he was the descendant of that person and had extraordinary talent. But Luffy agreed without even thinking about it. Okay, welcome to join, Usopp. Yes, Captain. Usopp was very happy, but unfortunately the ship had already left the port, and he still boarded the ship smoothly with the help of Luffy. While putting things for Usopp, Zoro asked his doubts. Don't you think it's fun to set off fireworks during a banquet? Ah, Sha Chen, Zoro, and Nami all showed confused faces. Even Sha Chen found it incredible. He originally thought that Luffy would give a reason, even if Jesus was Usopp's father. Usopp had such potential to become a top sniper, which was reasonable, but he gave such a reason. But I have to say that although it was a joke, it was Luffy's fault. Sure enough, after a few people digested it a little, Luffy was punched by Nami again. She felt more and more that her future was bleak. Nami was very clear about the positioning of her strength, and she belonged to the protected. As a result, there is now another weak chicken Usopp, so won't her protection be reduced? Not long after they left, the newspaper for the new week was also delivered with the news bird. Miss, we should go back. The wind is strong at the seaside. Mary reminded Kaya, who had been staring at the direction where the Straw Hat Pirates disappeared. Ahem. Kaya cooperated and coughed twice. Sighing slightly, if she was braver, could she also go out to sea on a ship like Usopp? She couldn't help but clench her fists. But in the end, she returned to the mansion on the top of the mountain honestly. After all, there was still a Chamber of Commerce that needed her to take care of. Although the management of the Chamber of Commerce was also fighting for power because of the death of her parents, Kaya just wanted to keep the part that belonged to her family. After selling it, she would be at ease to be a doctor. As soon as she arrived at the door, Mary saw the newspaper stuffed in the mailbox. The money in the mailbox had been taken away. Mary habitually went over and picked it up, and then a wanted order was drawn from it. Again, as a butler of a merchant family, he had an instinctive aversion to pirates. Even if there was a Jesus Bu here, it had nothing to do with his family. But with Sha Chen's incident, he had a different view of pirates, knowing that pirates were different from pirates. But after unfolding it, he saw Sha Chen on it, and his eyes immediately stared. The style of the main body of the picture is no different from that of an ordinary wanted poster, but the thin and poorly dressed man in the middle of the picture is Sha Chen. Although he is not very majestic and domineering, the 50 million Bailey's bounty below is still enough to shock the entire East China Sea. Mary, what's wrong? Kaya walked over, lifted the hair by her ear and took a look, then raised her hand to cover her mouth. This is Mr. Sha Chen. It's hard to imagine, because Sha Chen in the picture is holding a mop and scrubbing the deck. Although a full-body photo of him was taken, it always feels a little bit off, especially at that time he was hungry for 6 meals in 3 days, his mental state was very bad, and he had to do so many dirty and tiring work. If it weren't for the handsomeness that people couldn't ignore, and the mother and son without any emotion, it would be difficult for people to connect the slightly thin man in the picture with Sha Chen. Mr. Sha Chen will be very angry if he sees it. Kaya quietly took the wanted poster in her hand and said with a little worry. It's none of our business whether he's angry or not, miss. We have to find a way to deal with him. This guy is really amazing. Mary, I want to be the president of the Chamber of Commerce. Ah, Mary was a little surprised. Miss, aren't you going to study medicine? Studying medicine can't save the world. What do you mean, miss? Nothing. Kaya shook her head. In fact, it was Sha Chen who said this. Because she was studying with a medical book at the time. Although she didn't have such a big ideal at all, for some reason, she remembered every word Sha Chen said these days. Although she had just met Sha Chen, he always appeared in her sight when he was free. Although it was too hurtful, but, the sky-dropping system completely defeated the childhood sweetheart. Just as Kaya thought, Sha Chen, who had been sailing for most of the day, finally encountered the first news bird since they went to sea. Bought several recent newspapers. As a matter of course, he found his wanted order, and he was currently the only wanted person in the entire Straw Hat Pirates. Villain Sha Chen. 50 million. I'm so envious. When will I get a bounty? Captain, Vice Captain, don't let me know who provided the picture. Although he has been in this world for less than a month, Sha Chen already has some of the qualities of a pirate. He also hopes that the photo on his wanted poster will be a mighty and domineering one, but now it's actually his most embarrassing moment. If he holds a meeting of 50 million Bailey pirates, he will probably be laughed to death. A deck cleaner is worthy of it. The expressions of the other three people are different. Luffy and Usopp are envious to death, Nami was scared to death. As for Zoro, he had not yet experienced the charm of the bounty and thought it would only be trouble. Sha Chen ignored them and continued to look through the newspaper, and finally found the most interesting news. Shock! The largest pirate group in the East China Sea was defeated. Vice Admiral Garp, Barati, the restaurant on the sea, tastes top-notch. Sha Chen was confused. He could understand the above news. Although the newspapers were all world economic news, due to the restrictions of the world government, many news about the Grand Line and the New World were rarely conveyed to the Four Seas through newspapers. Big News Morgans, although he was thinking about making big news all day, he also knew the bottom line of the world government. Before there was news that was enough to make him stand up, he would still cooperate with the work of the world government. Therefore, many islands in the Four Seas have world news newspapers distributed, and they usually value news about their respective seas. Mainly for most of the newspaper subscribers in the Four Seas, the New World 4 emperors and 7 warlords are too far away for them. No matter how great the news is, it is useless if it cannot be sold. So there is nothing unexpected about the first news. Although it did not appear in the original work, it does not mean that it did not happen. The pirate group of Admiral Click should be defeated. But what the hell is this Garp? He must know what kind of power the sea restaurant Barati is, but Garp has never taken care of it. One is that the Navy knows that they are a group of pirates who have turned over a new leaf and are role models. Secondly, the youngest son of the Vinsmoke family is right there, and the Navy must give him some face. But pirates are pirates. In the eyes of the Navy heroes, hey, no, he is a vice admiral who can sacrifice a whole batch of boys for a promise, and his son is the world's most vicious gangster, the leader of the Revolutionary Army, Dragon, and his grandson Luffy who has now become a pirate. This family has a complicated identity. But Sha Chen feels that this is not a coincidence. Garp is looking for his own traces, but it gives people a feeling of not being very dedicated. But he did challenge the bottom line of the Navy. However, doubts were doubts, and the sense of crisis in his heart did not disappear. Then will this Garp be in Barati? At that time, he was thinking, and he had already handed the newspaper in his hand to the next person. Oh, Grandpa said that this place is delicious, I want to go, there must be the best chef here. But this made the other three people on the deck except Sha Chen suddenly fall into silence, and then Usopp said with a trembling voice, Luffy, you just said that Barati was opened by your grandfather. No, I'm talking about old man Garp. Usopp rolled his eyes, bang, fainted. Nami, the grandson of the Navy is a pirate. Oh, me too, that doesn't matter. Zoro, Vice Admiral of the Navy, can you withstand my sword? Luffy, can you let me ask your grandfather for advice when the time comes? Now, not to mention the others, even Sha Chen looked at Zoro in surprise. Listen to what you are saying. What's wrong? Zoro was puzzled. What's wrong? Haven't you heard of the Navy hero, Vice Admiral Garp? Nami was a little crazy, she knew that Garp must be strong. After all, her adoptive mother admired him very much when she was alive, and the Pirate King was also caught by him. That's totally fine, my grandfather likes to beat people, and it hurts a lot. He will definitely beat me when the time comes, let's go together. And Sha Chen. I want to challenge you first, what weapon does your grandfather use? Zoro said, looking at Nami, I haven't heard of the Navy hero, but it's okay as long as it's strong enough. My grandfather doesn't seem to have used weapons. Luffy pinched his chin and thought, after all, his grandfather never used the second trick to beat him. Suddenly he thought of the adjutant next to Garp. But there is a swordsman beside my grandfather, so my grandfather should also be able to use a sword. Really? That's great. Zoro's eyes lit up. Sha Chen opened his mouth and thought about it, so he decided not to intervene. Although he couldn't figure out Zoro's brain circuit, it was not the right time to confront Garp. In fact, the main reason was that since Sha Chen got on board, his presence in this pirate group was too strong. No matter what enemy, they couldn't resist for a while in their hands. So far, Luffy and Zoro's presence has been greatly weakened. Luffy is okay, he is careless. But Zoro is different, he went to sea to become the world's #1 swordsman. And the way to achieve this is inevitable, or the most convenient way is to challenge the strong. Defeat the enemy again and again, surpass yourself, until one day, challenge Hawkeye Mihawk, who is now sitting on the throne of the world's #1 swordsman. But since he joined the pirate group, although it was only a few days, he did fight, but he faced weak chickens. The improvement brought to him was minimal, and Zoro was strong in his bones. He believed that he was not weaker than anyone. Even if the captain and the vice-captain were ahead, it was only because of the power of the devil fruit. But as long as he gave himself time to grow, he would be able to surpass them sooner or later. And now this Navy hero Garp in Nami's mouth is one of the trial targets he has chosen. Although it is a bit impolite, in Zoro's opinion, this Garp should also have good luck, just like Monka, who thought he defeated Beiji Kuro, and was promoted above his level. And the effect should be very limited. After all, he has understood the promotion mechanism of the Navy. He arrested the Pirate King, but such an achievement was not enough to be promoted to the level of Admiral. Obviously, this is the opponent's strength limit. But Luffy can't beat his grandfather, which means that such a person is stronger than him. It is very meaningful to defeat such a person, and it is also a very suitable challenge target. As for the past, he really hadn't heard of it. It was because he was born in the post-One Piece era, and he always thought that his master was just the owner of a kendo gym in a small village on an ordinary island, and he had no strength. Even the news about the world's #1 swordsman Hawkeye Mihawk was not known until he went to sea. In addition to the above reasons, there is another reason that Zoro feels that Luffy is the grandson of the naval hero Garp after all, and it is not appropriate for the two to fight or not, no matter what the result is. Vice Captain Sha Chen is the second in command on the ship and the one who gives orders. He does not want to plant a rift between the captain and the vice captain when the pirate group just sets sail. Such a pirate group will not go far, and it will also affect his own path of cultivation. It is more appropriate for him, who does not have a fixed position on the ship, to challenge. He feels that he is still very smart. Sha Chen is not sure whether Garp is waiting at the sea restaurant Barati. But he also tried to persuade Luffy, but the other party insisted on going. Taking advantage of this time, Nami also popularized what a Navy hero is to Zoro. After listening to it, the other party was not afraid, but became more eager to fight. He walked to the side to practice Wado Ikimonji. As for Usopp, since he fainted, he didn't know whether he woke up or not. Anyway, he was lying there stiffly, but was accidentally stepped on by Zoro in the middle. He moved to the edge and had no intention of intervening in the discussion. After thinking it over again and again, Sha Chen thought he should go to Barati. First of all, the ship really needs a chef. Secondly, Vincent Sanji is related to his big plan in the future, and he must go on board. Finally, Garp may not stay in the Barati restaurant for too long. All the previous ones were speculations. After all, it was his grandson who went out to sea. No matter how much he kept shouting that he had to catch Luffy, everyone could see what he was thinking. Even Sha Chen felt that the analysis posts on the forum in his previous life were not without reason. For example, this family of 3 had a big secret, and the source came from Gall D. Roger. Of course, Luffy probably didn't know this secret. Even from the anime, Luffy didn't know that Dragon was his father until he was in the Seven Water capital. It was quite outrageous. Otherwise, Sha Chen still felt it was impossible for Garp to do that with just a promise. Of course, this was Sha Chen's speculation. He discussed with Nami and expanded the original 2-day voyage to 5 days, and also took a big detour. Unfortunately, it was too late when he received the newspaper, otherwise Sha Chen could leave them some misleading information before leaving from Zailuobu village. Soon, 4 days passed. That night, Sha Chen trained on the deck as usual. His spirit and physique had fully adapted to the surge in the past few days, and he no longer felt the oppression. In addition, he studied hypnosis skills. Unfortunately, even though he tried all the hypnosis techniques he accidentally came into contact with in his previous life, he still couldn't upgrade this skill to LV2. The level was stuck, and the effect that could be achieved at present was also unsatisfactory. It was just teasing Luffy and Usopp. Even Nami was just a trance, and as for Zoro, it was useless. He overturned his previous speculation. After all, he used to think that the mysterious mushroom in Zangao's story might be the prototype of some kind of devil fruit. Another big gain was the silent step. He also fused the silent step with the spoon these 2 days, directly raising the level of the silent step to LV2, although several LV1s superimposed together had already touched the limit of level 2. But the gap between LV1 and LV2 is simply ridiculous. Then there is the number of daily check-in collections. He has collected 4 times now. It is also because he did not encounter other pirates on the way of a big circle, and he does not know how this plugin, the God-level collection technique, is determined. So far, Luffy and Nami have been defeated by him, but he has not obtained the number of collections. He thought about it and thought of a reason: hostility. Not only the hostility of the opponent, but also the hostility and malice generated by himself. After all, when he controlled Nami for the first time, he did not hold back. The opponent must be hostile to him, but he did not. And at the military dock of the number 153 naval base, he shot Kobe into the sea. Theoretically, he defeated the opponent, but there was no new collection. This is because both sides have no hostility. He feels that this restriction is not very good, and it severely limits the speed of his upgrade. However, it is not impossible to fatten up Luffy and others before doing it. Sha Chen feels that his tolerance is limited. After that, Sha Chen jumped onto the sea, and then he started his silent steps, and the whole person appeared hundreds of meters away as if teleporting. Not long after, Usopp, who came out to take over, did not find Sha Chen on the deck, but he did not dare to check whether Sha Chen had returned to his vice-captain's room. He continued to monitor the ship's navigation according to the assigned work. It was not until the next morning, when Luffy yelled to find Sha Chen to cook, that everyone realized that Sha Chen was missing. "I have looked for him, but there is no one anywhere, and there is no message left." "Sha Chen won't leave the pirate group, right?" Usopp's voice rang out in the silent restaurant. "Impossible, he definitely won't." Luffy, who was always carefree, reacted very strongly. Zoro stood at the gate holding a samurai sword, and Nami was panicking. In fact, he agreed with Usopp's statement. After all, the deterrent power of the Navy hero garb was really scary. Especially when Sha Chen suggested that they go around a big circle and go to the Bharati restaurant. Nami didn't think much about it and thought it was a rational choice, but now she was a little unsure. How can it be impossible? Even if that Vice Admiral Garp is the grandfather among the captains, don't forget that Sha Chen is the only wanted pirate on the entire ship, and he is a big pirate with a total of 50 million Baileys. Usopp was still chattering. He could clearly feel that Sha Chen didn't like him. So on weekdays, he also tried to avoid Sha Chen as much as possible. But he didn't have a good impression of Sha Chen in his heart. At this time, he was not slandering, he just felt that if it were him, he would have run away long ago. But no one agreed with his words, except Luffy. The others looked at him with a little more coldness. "Sha Chen must have something to do, let's wait here for a while." Luffy grinned. Then he shouted to everyone to hurry up and eat. They waited here for 3 days, until all the supplies on the ship were consumed, and then they had to move on. The atmosphere on the ship became visibly dull, even Luffy was silent a lot, and they soon arrived at the sea restaurant Bharati. But the situation at the restaurant was a little bad. Their people were busy repairing the restaurant. There were a lot of ship wreckages around the restaurant ship, which obviously had experienced a war. This was attacked. Isn't it said that Bharati restaurant is a place where pirates and navy can share food peacefully? Zoro looked surprised. Moreover, he saw from afar that the restaurant chefs of the ship being repaired immediately became alert after seeing his small boat appear. Nami knew that Zoro was asking about her, and she shook her head. "Anyway, when I came here before, everything was quite harmonious. It's just that the chefs and waiters have bad tempers." Suddenly, a light bulb flashed in her mind, and she thought of Sha Chen who had left, and her eyes widened slightly. Could it be that Sha Chen did all this? As the ship got closer and closer, the Bharati restaurant became clearer and clearer. It turned out that the wreckage floating on the sea was not all from the Bharati restaurant and the unknown pirate group, but also from the wreckage of the Navy warship. It gave people a feeling that a widespread shipwreck had occurred here. Soon the people in the restaurant seemed to have discovered something, and a one-legged old man wearing a very tall chef's hat walked out of the restaurant door. "Are you the Straw Hat Pirates?" "Yes." Several people on the ship looked at each other. "We've been waiting for you for a long time. Please come and taste the food we prepared for you. We will definitely do our best." Ah, Luffy and the other four were even more confused. Zoro gave such a look. "Didn't you just say that the people in their restaurant have a bad temper? This is not good. This is treating customers as gods." Nami didn't answer. In fact, as long as they don't eat a free meal, it's fine. But Luffy didn't think much. Before the ship entered the port, he jumped directly onto the deck of the Bharati restaurant. "Where is the delicious food?" His eyes lit up and he ran directly into the open door. Zoro thought it was bad and jumped down, but he didn't chase after him. He was cautiously guarding against everyone, but he didn't expect that people including the red-footed Zeph suddenly laughed. As expected of that man's captain, it's really surprising. But that gentleman said that if their captain didn't have enough to eat, he wouldn't pay the bill. How is that possible? We are Bharati. Bet on the honor of the chef. Oh, under the confused gaze of Zoro, Nami and others, this group of chefs who looked more like pirates became inexplicably excited and rushed into the restaurant. Of course, they didn't forget to invite them in. The restaurant was also shabby. Although it had been urgently repaired, there were only a few good tables left. As a swordsman, Zoro was very sensitive to certain things. He didn't detect any hostility from these people, so he sat down with peace of mind. Not long after, a yellow-haired man with a thick ice pack wrapped around his body and wearing a black suit rushed out of the kitchen with a metal tray and served Luffy, Zoro and Usopp a glass of white water in turn, and then he came to Nami and knelt on one knee. "Beautiful lady, shall we meet somewhere?" Sanji said, and put a drink similar to some kind of sundae in front of Nami. "Please taste it, this is the ice and snow goddess I made specially for you." This difference in treatment is too obvious. Although Nami is very good at disguising herself, she couldn't help but lean back deeply when facing Sanji, who licked her inexplicably. "What's going on? Isn't this guy a pervert? I want this." Luffy didn't care and reached out to grab it. But Sanji was prepared, and he pulled Luffy's hands back with a high whip kick, and continued to attack to test the level of this captain, but was taken over by Zoro, who rushed out, just like a destined enemy. The two of them went back and forth, and in the blink of an eye, they had passed more than a dozen moves. However, they were very restrained, did not use heavy hands, and did not damage the various tables and chairs in the room that were already in ruins. Curly eyebrows, what do you mean? Curly, green algae head, I'm going to hit you. Although the two fought fiercely, and even the conflict was inexplicable, they were very restrained at the beginning, and even Zoro did not draw his sword. Usopp and Nami had been scared and hid aside, leaving Luffy sitting at the table to taste the Sunday-style drink that Sanji made for Nami. He didn't care at all, and the two fought more and more fiercely. It was not until 2 minutes later that Zoro was ready to draw his sword, and Redfoot Zeph rushed out of the kitchen and kicked Sanji hard in the lower back. "What are you doing, Sanji? Have you forgotten the rules of our restaurant? Customers are God. Now, immediately, get back to the kitchen." Redfoot Zeph's head was big. He held Sanji's collar tightly with both hands and dragged him back to the kitchen. A farce ended here. Then everyone sat back down, and Zoro calmed down a little. "This remains as very strange. Do you think it has something to do with Sha Chen?" "It must be his, but why?" "Maybe it's to distract the Navy hero Vice Admiral Garp," Usopp said. Luffy ate a lot, and had no intention of intervening in the discussion. Nami was so angry. "Come on, they are discussing Sha Chen and your grandfather." She was about to punch him, but the food was almost ready. One by one, the exquisite and delicious food was served on the table, and even Zoro, who had always been restrained and alert, started eating faster and faster. "This restaurant is really good, but it's a pity that I have never been there before. It's not that I didn't want to come, but the situation on the sea is very complicated." And Zoro and Nami also found an opportunity to ask the reason clearly. These chefs were indeed not forced by Sha Chen. But the reason, they were also stunned. In short, During the 3 days that Sha Chen disappeared, he accomplished great feats that most people would not even dare to think about. First, he destroyed the clique pirates, then he tied with the world's #1 swordsman Hawkeye Mahawk, and finally he sank the pirate hero Garp. Sink, literally. This time, even Luffy didn't care about enjoying the food. He held a big bone in one hand and slammed his chin heavily on the table. His grandfather, who couldn't even muster the strength to resist, was actually defeated. Chef Zeph, are you right? Nami knew the names of these people before. Sanji, who came out at some point, leaned against the door frame, holding a cigarette and said, "The old man won't lie, but now it seems that the vice captain should simply open the way for you and lead away the hero, Vice Admiral Monkey D. Garp." All the previous speculations suddenly became a reality, and Zoro and Nami were silent. Usopp was still immersed in the news he had heard before. Because he could often get newspapers from Kaya's family, the richest man in Zailuo village, Usopp was still well informed about various information from the outside world, even the stories of the great sea warriors he made up. It was originally a mixture formed by taking materials and references from these newspapers and melting them. If there were no pirates in this world, he would not want to be a pirate. He definitely has a talent to become a writer. Hey, curly eyebrows, where did the world's greatest swordsman Hawkeye Mahawk go? Who are you calling curly eyebrows, green algae head? For some reason, Sanji's anger rose inexplicably when he saw Zoro. What did you say? Zoro was knocked to the ground by Nami's fist before he finished speaking. Red-footed Zeph's pupils shrank slightly. Obviously, this little girl looks the weakest. Could it be that she is as hidden as Mr. Sha Chen? When that gentleman came to the door, they were having a difficult duel with the clique pirates. Although the clique pirates were defeated by Hawkeye with one sword, there is no doubt that he is still one of the largest pirates in the East China Sea. Especially for their sea restaurant Bharati, it is even more like a behemoth. Zeph, Sanji and others fought hard, but they were defeated step by step. Seeing that the entire sea restaurant was about to be demolished, Sha Chen suddenly appeared. He stood on the sea, walking like a leisurely stroll, and as he got closer and closer, the waves under his feet became higher and higher. When he came close, the waves had risen to more than 50 meters and enveloped the entire clique pirates. Those people were already scared silly. Even Admiral Crick and the Ghostakin, who was holding a kind of walking stick as a weapon, had never seen this scene. Although the knife that Hawkeye Mahawk casually chopped out at that time was unimaginable to them, Sha Chen's move was even more unstoppable. Then the whole wave covered it, and the clique pirates completely disappeared on the sea. When Sha Chen landed on the deck of their Bharati restaurant, before Crick and others shouted, the whole person disappeared silently and defeated those people easily. Then Sha Chen summoned a layer of water curtain to cover the area. I don't know what he did. Anyway, when the water curtain dissipated, there were only a few heads on the deck except Sha Chen. Sha Chen said that this was the meal money, and then he walked into the restaurant that had become a ruin. These chefs, even Sanji and Jefu, had never seen such a frightening scene. After all, they make a living on the sea, and tsunamis are the most dangerous natural disasters in their concept. And the man in front of him could actually control the tsunami. Obviously, he was not tall, and his physique was only slightly strong. But Hojao Jungfang and others did not dare to neglect it. They quickly cleaned up and brought out their best cooking skills. Sha Chen ate very happily and even invited Sanji in the end. Sanji hesitated. After all, Sha Chen had saved their restaurant. If Sha Chen had not appeared, their Bharati restaurant might have become history. He believed in the spirit of chivalry and could not turn a blind eye. And he really yearned for the sea and wanted to go to sea again. But he knew that his strength was far from enough, and he had been honing it over the years. But if he became a partner with Sha Chen, the gap in strength would be made up. But if he left, what would happen to the restaurant? Old man Zeph alone could not defend it. But he didn't have time to respond. Hawkeye Mahawk, known as the world's #1 swordsman, arrived, and after him, Vice Admiral Garp, known as the hero of the Navy, arrived. At first, Garp wanted to arrest Sha Chen in the name of the Navy and send him to Impel Down prison on the Grand Line. And he chose to arrest Sha Chen himself. Sha Chen tried it a little, and whether it was physical fitness or other abilities, he was far inferior to Garp, so he went straight to water escape. Buddha did not leave directly, but created layers of tsunamis as before, which not only sank Navy Garp and the people on his ship, but also forced Hawkeye Mihawk to retreat. Being able to control the power of seawater on the sea is simply too invincible. After all, no matter how elite the crew on Garp's ship is, they are only strong in one unit, and Sha Chen starts with a range attack. However, although Sha Chen did not show up later, the sea restaurant Bharati, which was originally in the center of the battle, was pushed away from the core of the battle by a strong force. Otherwise, even if only a few waves came down, their ship would be scrapped. But just like this, they refreshed their three views again, and never thought that human power could reach such an outrageous level. And Sanji was really moved. Now, Redfoot Zeph just felt that they had not fulfilled the agreement with Sha Chen, but also knew that Sha Chen came from the Straw Hat Pirates, so he planned to keep this agreement with the Straw Hat Pirates. As expected, they arrived soon, and then there was today's scene. Sha Chen has never appeared again. Where did he go? Nami asked anxiously. This is not a draw, but the devil fruit. Zoro pinched his chin. It sounded that the world's #1 swordsman was not very powerful. He had seen Sha Chen practicing the devil fruit ability. But at that scale, he could cut a gap with all his strength. As expected of the vice captain I chose. Luffy laughed and let go and ate. Sure enough, his premonition was right, Sha Chen was fine. As for Usopp, after he fainted from fear, he got up from the ground again and pointed at Sanji. Did you say vice captain just now? Yes, Vice Captain Sha Chen has personally invited me. If I don't get on board, it would be too tactless. Sanji exhaled a long puff of smoke. All kinds of experiences of being excluded in these days flashed through his mind. It was as if after being invited by Sha Chen, he had become something extremely dangerous overnight, and everyone, including Jeffu, took a sharp turn for the worse in their attitude towards him. In the past, Jeffu would at most yell at him, but now, if he did anything wrong, he would just come up and spit on his kidneys. But kidneys are so precious to a man, how could you just kick them? Ah, you troublesome guy, you're finally leaving, get out of here. Yes, I don't know how much business you've delayed us over the years. Asshole Sanji, you'd better take care of yourself in the future. Various curses of disgust rang out. Although the words are unpleasant, what does it mean that you curse until your eyes are red and tears are streaming? Is there something wrong? Tisk. Sanji's eyes were slightly red. Although these people's words were unpleasant, he was still worried about these guys. He didn't intend to stay here for long, so he turned back to the kitchen and continued to work. Then the chefs and waiters immediately quieted down. The only sound in the whole restaurant was Luffy's wolfing down. Zeph bowed deeply to Luffy. Sanji, I'll leave it to you from now on. As soon as he finished speaking, Sanji, who had just entered the kitchen, ran out in a hurry and kicked Zeph in the back of his waist, but when he was about to land on him, he just used a clever force to push him out of the door. Red-footed Zeph was also a hot-tempered person. The two of them fought back and forth on the deck. It was also the last time that red-footed Zeph gave Sanji guidance. The chefs and waiters just surrounded the two of them, cheered Zeph hard, and kept belittling Sanji. But no one got involved. This is their own business. Luffy's people are not easy to control, and they finished the feast without leaving any. Boarding the Golden Beauty, and then watching Sanji with a swollen nose and face, carrying a huge package on his back. But the closer he got to the dock, the slower his steps became. The red-footed Zeph, who was sitting on the doorstep to rest and had messy clothes, couldn't help it anymore. Sanji, don't catch a cold. Sanji couldn't hold it anymore. He turned around suddenly, knelt on his knees, and kowtowed to Zeph. Old man, thank you for your care during this time. I will definitely find Albul. The Straw Hat Pirates set sail, and they added a new member. Chef, Sanji. After a simple discussion, they decided to go directly to Rogue Town. Because Nami said that Rogue Town is the last supply point to the Grand Line, the town of the beginning and end, and a place that must be passed to the Grand Line. They think it is most appropriate to wait for Sha Chen there. After making the decision, everyone drove towards the direction of Rogue Town. On the other side, on the boundless sea, Sha Chen climbed out of the sea water. With a thought, all the salt on his body was splashed out. Finally got rid of this old guy. Sha Chen's face was full of fatigue. He expected that Garp would be difficult to deal with, but he didn't expect to be chased by the other party for nearly 3 days. If he hadn't drawn a lot of physical and mental attribute points from Click and others before, he could replenish the consumed physical strength at any time, and with his water control power, he could also survive underwater. He would have been caught by this old guy long ago. Of course, the most important thing is that he has developed a new development direction for water control skills, using water flow to make sound waves. According to Sha Chen's tests in the past few days, the maximum detection distance of this Garp is a circle with a radius of 3 kilometers. As for whether the other party has hidden tricks, Sha Chen is not sure. Of course, this refers to the color of observation. Although the observation haki is a kind of use of mental power, it is essentially achieved through listening. Of course, this does not mean that sounds of different frequencies can produce effects, but to achieve sound vibrations of the same frequency. The vibrations created by Sha Chen's manipulation of the water flow are almost exactly the same as his own, and this vibration is also locked in each water clone, which successfully deceived the other party. Now his basic data has also made a small leap. Physical fitness, 436.3. Spirit, 680.2. The skills have added Life Return LV1, and there is Armed Color Domineering LV1. Life Return comes from the Ghost Agent. This Armed Color Domineering undoubtedly comes from Garp, who was purely holding the idea of experimenting at the time, dragged the other party into the water 3 kilometers, stretched out his hand and quickly touched the latter's body, and used the God-level collection technique. He actually stepped on the Armed Color Domineering directly, but it was a pity that it was only LV1. But this is much more convenient than collecting when the other party has no resistance, and it also opened up a new world for Sha Chen. However, he also left a great gift for Garp, which was the main reason why he had been chasing him until now. Where is this place? Sha Chen stood on the sea and looked around, looking at the sky. It was already noon, but there were no landmarks or tools that could be used, and his inventory was already full. After all, he could only collect the sea or the big fish passing by as he guessed from Click. This also led to his collection times being exhausted. I can't go to Rogue Town. I have to find a way to notify Luffy and the others. Sha Chen was in a bad mood. Why didn't I draw a Den Den Mushi? After Sha Chen smashed and overturned Garp's doghead ship, he did get a lot of Den Den Mushi. Unfortunately, he took the risk to approach Garp, and collecting one from him was already the limit. Originally, he could not take such a risk, but Sha Chen really could not control his hands. Moreover, with Garp's experience, it can be expected that the one who will chase him later is most likely Aokiji Kuzan, one of the 3 admirals of the Navy. After all, the opponent's Devil Fruit ability can be said to be a natural counter to his water control power. Unfortunately, he has no way to control solid water molecules now. He thinks that to achieve this level, he must reach level 3 at least. While thinking, Sha Chen picked a direction at random, controlled the water flow, and pushed himself to rush away. He needed to find an island first and then determine the specific location. After about half a day of moving forward, Sha Chen's physical strength was slowly recovering, and he was not in a hurry to go. A small island was in sight, but when he saw the fortress-like building on the reef of the small island and the number 16 on it, Sha Chen's pupils shrank. What a coincidence! In order to avoid Garp's pursuit, he basically spent these days underwater. Unexpectedly, this coincidence actually brought him to the vicinity of base 16, but Sha Chen's heart skipped a beat. Was Garp here? Without saying anything, he immediately retreated. After reaching a distance of 10 kilometers, Sha Chen separated a water clone and used the water flow to control it to simulate a biological frequency similar to that of dolphins, which consumed a lot of physical strength. Then he slowly approached. Water escape telescope technique. Through the special mirror formed in the connecting channel, the picture seen by the water clone was projected over. The area of this small island is about 20 square kilometers. Sha Chen first controlled the water clone to tour the offshore area and found that except for a few small ships on the military dock in the south, there was indeed no trace of Garp. But he was not completely relieved. After all, Garp chased him alone for 2 days and 2 nights. Sha Chen could occasionally use his ability to create a cave on the seabed to take a break. But the old guy used the moon step from beginning to end and stayed in the air. Sha Chen deliberately consumed Garp's physical strength and fled in the direction of no islands. Sha Chen estimated that this kind of physique must have at least thousands of points, especially since the other party is so old. It is impossible to say that his peak combat power has not declined. Birth, aging, illness and death are the laws of nature. After some exploration, there was indeed nothing, but Sha Chen still did not act. He waited quietly until the night fell completely. He created a piece of fog to cover the entire island, and then used the water clone to check the naval base, but there was nothing. Only then did he approach and search again with the observation color, and then he felt relieved. Think about it, even if I used the power of water control, I ran for nearly half a day. In fact, this short circuit is more than 200 kilometers. Sha Chen breathed a sigh of relief and sat down on the ground. Apart from anything else, I've been running around everywhere these days and my mouth is full of food. I don't know if Nami will make the same choice as in the original book after my intervention. Besides, with my intervention in the Bharati restaurant incident, Zoro probably has no chance to compete with the world's #1 swordsman Hawkeye Mihawk, and Sha Chen is not sure whether Sanji will get on the ship. At that time, he only had time to mention it, and Garp arrived. Just rest here for a few days and adapt to the new ability. Sha Chen made a decision. If he couldn't wait for the other members of the Straw Hat Pirates here, he would not go to Rogue Town, but directly enter the Grand Line. Go to the Twin Gorge and wait. If the pirate group also passed by there, Crocus, who was guarding the Twin Lighthouse, should know. Anyway, Sha Chen would never meet Garp again. A week passed, and everything was stable. Garp really didn't feel like coming here. Even if the Navy of the 16th branch went out for patrol, it was just a gesture near the coast. These 16 branches were rotten to the core, but they also gave him an opportunity to find out about the situation in Rogue Town, and he unexpectedly learned that Garp had returned to the headquarters 2 days ago. It was a bit unexpected, but thinking about the great gift he left for him, it was not incomprehensible. At the same time, Sha Chen also discovered the treasure hiding place of the mouse these days. A rough estimate is that, excluding the gold and precious gems, the cash alone has reached 630 million Baileys. It is simply an unimaginable huge sum of money. But think about it, this guy can collude with Eren, which means that his bottom line is very low, so low that it is outrageous. Beep beep, Sha Chen had just packed up the money and treasures of Colonel Mouse and was about to leave when the base suddenly sounded an alarm, which could not be stopped even more than 20 meters underground. What's going on? Sha Chen didn't think that it was a reaction caused by his touching Colonel Mouse's treasures. After all, he had carefully checked it before taking action, and immediately controlled the water flow to create a pair of eyeballs along the water veins. This was his simplification of the water clone technique. The outside scene was transmitted over, and then it was discovered that it was Colonel Mouse who called his men to leave the port urgently. Sha Chen's heart moved. Could this incident be the Kokoja village incident? It really is. Originally, this week had passed, and Sha Chen thought that because of his intervention, Nami would not abandon everyone and leave alone as in the original book. Unexpectedly, it turned out to be like this. I really don't know whether to say it is the powerful correction force of the world, or some other reason. We have to go to Kokoja village. These guys are really worrying. After Colonel Mouse's ship went far away, Sha Chen created a cloud of water mist, covering a small area of the island, and then wrapped the money and treasures with water flow and chased them from the water surface. It was late at night, and it was normal for the sea to be foggy. Sha Chen easily jumped onto the deck of the warship. If he met someone, he would directly control the water flow to form a vortex and activate the hypnosis skill. It was like entering an empty space. He found a relatively clean cabin in the cabin, put his things away, and fell asleep. These days he has figured out the strength of this group of losers. To be frank, Sha Chen can destroy them with a backhand. Nokigo, I can buy the village back tomorrow. In the Orange Grove hut where Nami and Nokigo were, the former burst into tears. Nokigo tightly grasped Nami's hand, thinking again, and that was why he didn't tell her the cruel truth. She originally thought that Nami could figure it out by herself, but for some reason, Nami, whose experience was far more complicated than hers, couldn't see through it. This was just a delaying tactic of the fishman Eren. It only saw Nami's talent for navigation. But Nami was so happy now, it would be too cruel to expose it directly. Nokiko couldn't bear it, so the matter was delayed, and Nami's alcohol tolerance was well known. She was so strong that even Zoro was not her opponent, but she was drunk without alcohol. After a few drinks, she fell asleep on the table in a daze. Nokiko was helpless. He carefully carried Nami to the bed, but tears would flow from the corners of her eyes from time to time, and she would mutter something like, sinking. Nokiko only thought it was a term used in navigation, and had never heard of this name, because their village was under the management of the dragon pirates, and they implemented information control on the village. Even on weekdays, except for Nami, the entire village was strictly restricted from going out to sea. They could only do some fishing and other work near the coast. There were resistances in these years, but all the resistances were all of them died. Naval Base Number 16 was not far from Kokoja village. Because of Sha Chen's intervention, it was normal that the time was different from the original. Therefore, at dawn, the naval ships of Branch Number 16 arrived at the port of Kokoja village. Some people saw the navy coming to the village and were so excited that they wanted to go up and tell the secret, but they were quickly pulled back by the villagers, even though there was no direct evidence. None of the villagers who went out to the sea to seek help from base number 16 came back alive. And they saw that the direction the navy was heading was not the base of the dragon pirates, but the orange orchard of Belmir's family. Originally, the people in the village felt sorry for Nami, the little girl, and quickly arranged for someone with quick legs and feet to go to Nami's house to tell the news. Unfortunately, they were quietly intercepted by the members of the dragon pirates who had been prepared for a long time, and they were beaten, robbed, and humiliated. It was not until Colonel Mouse and his men arrived at Orangetown and violently kicked open the gate that Nokiko and Nami in the house were awakened. Navy. Nami was startled and instinctively shrank behind Nokiko. Although she returned secretly from Rogue Town and did not find any signs of being wanted, she had a natural fear of the official power of the Navy. Who is Nami? Excuse me, sir, what can I do for you? Nokiko had noticed that Colonel Mouse's eyes fell on Nami, but as a sister's responsibility, she stepped forward, even though her hands were shaking. I am Colonel Mouse of the 16th Division of the East China Sea Navy. I received a report that there is a thief named Nami in your Kokoja village who stole a large amount of money from a nobleman. Now we are responsible for recovering it. Is this impossible? Nami instinctively felt that something was wrong. In order to raise money, she had used all kinds of means. But the stolen goods were all ill-gotten gains from the pirates, slave hunting groups and others. She never had any thoughts that she shouldn't have about those innocent people, even the Chamber of Commerce doing legitimate business. She has a bottom line. Although she did steal, those people didn't dare to look for the Navy at all. She didn't realize the relationship between the slave hunting group and the celestial dragons. What's even more strange is that these Marines seemed to have a target in mind. As soon as they came in, they scattered to search in their orange orchard. This made Nami feel even worse. Sure enough, not long after, Colonel Mouse's men came with a huge box. Colonel, we found it, about 100 million Baileys. A lieutenant colonel level man said. From the opened box, it can be seen that there are gold, Baileys, and jewelry in the box, and some Baileys have dried dark red blood on them. Nami felt dizzy and subconsciously wanted to run over. Nokiko almost didn't hold her back until those Marines raised their flintlock muskets and pointed them at them. Nokiko didn't dare to act rashly, but he still protected Nami tightly. The latter sat on the ground as if she had lost her soul. How is it possible? No, it's impossible. Little girl, just be thankful that someone has come forward to guarantee you. Let's go. The two mouse-like whiskers of Colonel Mouse twitched. After saying that, he withdrew with a group of Marines. Nokiko hugged Nami with heartache. He comforted her softly until Nami came to her senses. She ignored the obstruction and ran out of the orange orchard. Nokiko couldn't stop her or catch up with her. Along, why did you lie to me? Nami met the fishman along halfway without any surprise. A purple shark fishman who looked very sorry for the audience. What are you talking about, Nami? Along's eyes were full of amusement. You are my crew member, why don't you honestly draw a sea map of the whole world for me? Nami was so angry that her eyes went dark. She wanted to reprimand him, but when she thought of Along's cruelty, she couldn't say her questions. Haha, Nami, isn't it just another 10 years? You can definitely realize your dream and redeem the people in your village from me. Ha ha ha. Along had no intention of hiding it, I promise, ha ha, I'll do what I say. Nami staggered back. At this moment, a lot of footsteps came from behind her. She looked back and saw that it was the villagers in the village. They were holding torches or lanterns, holding kitchen knives, fish knives, or sickles in their hands, and they came over aggressively. Nami, we have seen what you have done over the years. Now leave it to us. You should take a rest, Nami. Aegean, who was standing in the front with scars all over his face, shouted with all his strength. Yes, Nami, thank you. Now let's look at us. Everyone thanked them inappropriately, but Nami's heart was broken. She knew that everyone was risking their lives. So Nami turned around, wiped the tears from her face, and pretended to smile. It's okay, I can do it, what are you doing? Go back quickly, yes, go back quickly. But no one listened to her, and they got closer and closer until they passed Nami, and no one retreated even though Nami pulled them. Their target was Eren. Nami saw that some people were trembling, and some were even scared to tears, but they kept moving forward as usual. Eren laughed and became more and more crazy. There was a faint red light flashing in his eyes. These people, it could kill them all with a few breathing needles, but it was afraid of dirtying its hands, and it still had some reason. Because it needs Nami to work for it, the villagers of this village are the best handle. If Nami is forced into a desperate situation and loses such a good navigator, it will be a pity. Of course, it is necessary to teach these lowly people a lesson. It turned and left. Just leave such things to your subordinates. Hey, but at this moment, a voice that was not too loud but clearly transmitted to everyone in Eren's ears sounded on the roof. Everyone looked over there. Nami, her heart skipped a beat, and she quickly looked up. Sure enough, there was a tall figure standing on the roof with a full moon on his back. It was still the familiar black suit, but there was a white cloak on his body, a bit like the style of a navy uniform, making him look more majestic and domineering. Sha Chen, save me. Of course, Nami. After the words fell, Sha Chen disappeared in a flash, and when he appeared again, he was already behind Eren. Eren was more than 2 meters tall, much taller than Sha Chen, but it did not prevent Sha Chen from subduing him with one move. It was you, the fish, who bullied my navigator and made him cry. Eren's mind only had time to flash the words, Navy 6 styles, before he felt a sharp pain in his body. As a fishman, he could clearly feel that a large amount of water in his body was being drained away. He wanted to use his talent to lock it, but the next second the speed of extraction was faster. A few seconds later, its entire body shrank 3 times, and it had no power to resist. When its neck twisted, it could hear a crisp sound and the friction of bones. Evildoer Sha Chen. He struggled to spit out these 2 words, but his body did not react too much, and the water in his body was constantly being drained away by Sha Chen. Until he shrank into a fishman who was just over 1 meter tall, dry. Falling to the ground helplessly. The villagers of Kokoja, including Nami, were terrified. This fishman who had been riding on their heads for more than 10 years and was considered invincible was defeated so easily. Sha Chen smelled his hand and it smelled fishy. After washing it with the water, Nami squeezed through the crowd and rushed to Sha Chen. Why did you come just now? Woo woo woo. Nami cried very sadly, and Nokiko and others also felt their noses sour for no reason. These days, Nami was really anxious. After she sent Luffy's people to Rogue Town, she couldn't find any news about Sha Chen. She thought about coming back to see and redeem the village by the way, but she didn't plan to leave the Straw Hat Pirates this time, and even left the ship to them. She just borrowed another ship. Sha Chen had prepared a lot of pretentious words, but at this time he just gently touched Nami's head. Sorry, I'm late. Now Nami cried even more miserably. The villagers just watched quietly. No one dared to speak loudly, but this place is not far from the Dragon Park. The fishmen of the pirate group heard the movement here and hurried over. Brother, boss along. Fishman karate water strike. Be careful, Noki shouted, and the harsh sound of breaking wind came. Sha Chen just thought about it, and a sticky water curtain appeared, blocking the water droplets that were comparable to bullets. Devil Fruit ability user. The Fishman Pirates are worthy of coming from the Grand Line, and they are also members of the Sun Pirates. Even so, you have to give me your life. The fact that the Fishman karate is useless does not mean that they have no other means of attack. In any case, they are also strong, who have been in the second half of the Grand Line. Wait for me a while. Sha Chen shook the white coat and put it on Nami. The latter was much shorter than himself, so his cloak dragged directly to the ground, and the dark words, Tangju, on the back were very conspicuous. This cloak was specially made by Sha Chen in the small town of base number 16, because the island itself was based on the base, so many naval logistics work was directly contracted to the residents of the town. Sha Chen easily found a navy-style coat that suited him, and then asked the top tailor to change it to a style that suited him. But at this time, the 3 cadres of the dragon pirates had already rushed up. The villagers screamed in fear, but no one chose to run away. Accompanied by a muffled sound, the 3 cadres who rushed up flew backwards together. This was because Sha Chen's attack speed exceeded the limit of the naked eye. In the eyes of ordinary people, he only attacked once, but in fact he threw 3 punches in a row and launched 4 silent steps. Marine 6 styles. Who are you? Kruby, who was more resistant to attack, had a high level of attainment in fishman karate. When Sha Chen hit him, he subconsciously chose to release the force, so he was not seriously injured and unconscious, and was not destroyed by one move. We are allies with Colonel Mouse of the 16th branch. Because Sha Chen had his back to them before, and the attack was very hasty and fierce, he didn't recognize Sha Chen for a while. So he just subconsciously guessed that Sha Chen might be from the Navy headquarters. Mentioning Colonel Mouse was nothing more than pointing, Sha Chen. Don't make it a dead end. Sha Chen didn't give them a chance to talk nonsense. He knocked them out with another punch. His figure flashed and rushed into the pirate group. He really had a small karami in each hand. No one could withstand his punch. Although he was only qualified to flee in embarrassment in Garp's hands, it didn't mean that he was really bad. 30 seconds later, none of the fishmen present could stand, and those who were seriously injured died immediately. Call it a day. You are the villain Sha Chen with a bounty of 130 million Baileys. Why are you here? Kloby woke up again, and his ability to do sit-ups is a bit too much. The answer is correct, but unfortunately there is no prize. Sha Chen just walked over and grinned, his teeth were white. He casually summoned a water ball, knocked him unconscious, and drilled a few holes in it. I don't believe he can wake up. The villagers of Kokoja looked at Sha Chen dully, cleaning up the demon that had oppressed them for 10 years like cutting vegetables and melons. It was unbelievable. A person can be so powerful. But the fact is that Sha Chen came to Nami. I'm a little hungry. Ah, Nami was very excited, and she instinctively rolled her eyes at Sha Chen. Follow me. He led Sha Chen to the direction of the orange orchard. Halfway through, Sha Chen looked at the virtual panel in front of him, thought of something, and went to the dragon pirates to fish out the manatee moo. Although this guy is not big in the original book, when he was thrown onto the street outside Nami's orange orchard, the ground shook 3 times. The size alone is 1/10 of Nami's orange orchard. Defeat the dragon pirates and get 20 collection times. Hey, in the original book, this manatee is indeed one of the main fighters of the dragon pirates. Adding the times he got by signing in these days, and the times he got by dealing with Colonel Mouse and others before, there are 38 times in total. Because we set out last night and experienced a morning, we added one more time to the original 7 times. Sha Chen has not used it. Moo. Nami and Nokiko ran out after hearing the noise. Do you know it? I thought it was the reserve food of the dragon pirates. Sha Chen pretended not to know, then I put it back. No, Sha Chen, just use it to make tempura. Nami showed a malicious smile on her face. No matter how cute this manatee Moo is after being animated, as a member of the dragon pirates, it has caused great losses to the surrounding villages. Fortunately, Moo is now unconscious. Soon Nami ran back to the kitchen and got a knife, but compared with Moo's 4 or 5 meter wide neck, there was no place to cut. She looked at Sha Chen pitifully. Forget it, leave it to me. Sha Chen stepped forward and put his hand on the manatee Moo's body, and a large amount of water in its blood vessels was drawn out. Moo woke up in pain and was about to go crazy and destroy the wall of Nami's house. Sha Chen controlled the water flow in the blood vessels in his body to rush back and forth, shattering the blood vessels in his important organs, and then upstream to crush his brain. The manatee moved and quieted down, except that the nerves in his body were still twitching. Then Sha Chen continued to extract blood from his body. By the way, isn't this manatee a ready-made innate holy body to be collected? There is no doubt that based on the physique of this manatee, it can 100% produce a large number of physical attribute points. Sha Chen stopped immediately, gathered the sharp water blades and cut off the relatively tender and plump parts of the manatee, and handed them to the two to cook. Then he was putting his hand on the manatee again to collect. I hope it's not too late, collect it once first. Collection successful. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 20 points of physical fitness. It's a bit little, but it's okay, just collect 5 consecutive points. After these days of pursuit, Sha Chen has realized that he was lucky to meet Klo. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so little collected now. Collection successful. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a total of 45 points of physical fitness, a set of manatee bones, a piece of manatee skin, and a manatee whip. This result, I can't say it's terrible, but it's too different from my expectations. Sha Chen looked at the light ball that appeared in front of him, and then looked at the skinless and boneless manatee that was already soft and rotten like rotten meat lying on the ground. And the large number of villagers in the village not far away who were watching this side carefully. His mind moved slightly. Forget it, anyway, I will definitely encounter better ones in the future. Collecting from Sea Kings is better than this. I also need to save some collection times in case of emergency. Then he waved to the villagers standing not far away and watching this side. Aegean hesitated for a moment and then trotted over. Master Sha Chen, what do you want? Aegean was very reserved. When a person's strength is so strong that they can't imagine it, and the means are still very cruel, anyone will be afraid of him. Let's take the food down and share it with everyone. It's a little gift from Nami. This is it. Thank you, Master Sha Chen. Aegean said. Sha Chen just waved his hand with his back to him and went into Nami's house. Nami is naturally not the chef. Sha Chen has seen her cooking skills. It's not average, but it's Alsish is much worse than me, the kind that can survive poison. And Nokiko also saw that Nami had been secretly looking at Sha Chen, so he found a reason to drive her out. Then he chatted with Sha Chen for a while, and the two sides also took the opportunity to exchange some information. Too abominable. When we meet next time, I will definitely vent your anger. You vent my anger. Sha Chen looked at Nami uncertainly. It's not that he is bragging, but in the original book, Nami, 2 years later, faced Garp, who was 2 years older, and was also a weak chicken who was defeated in one move. What's the look in your eyes? I said I will vent your anger, so I will vent your anger. Just wait, I will beat Luffy. Ah, you said this, okay. Sha Chen thought that he had misunderstood, but Luffy was also unlucky. There is no way. Who made Garp Luffy's grandfather? Moreover, Sha Chen also felt that Nami was just talking, but up to now, the other party has not left the pirate group as in the original book. It seems that his existence is still very useful, so let's go back and make up for the banquet for them to join the pirate group. Both I and Zoro have had it, so I can't be partial. At the same time, Sha Chen also confirmed a piece of news, that is, Garp really left Rogue Town. It would be strange if he didn't find a way to solve his own problems quickly. After all, he represents the image of the Navy. So Sha Chen planned to take Nami back to Rogue Town after dinner and find Smoker to draw. It's best to draw out the opponent's devil fruit. Although the smoke devil fruit is called the weakest natural system, to be honest, Sha Chen feels that this is completely Smoker's wrong choice. You know, smoke is granular and solid. If you develop it casually, it has the potential to be a frozen fruit. It's a waste to give it to him. After eating and drinking, Sha Chen went to deal with the fishmen of the Arlong pirates. There is nothing to say, all of them are sentenced to death. Sha Chen couldn't hold back and used 5 collection times on Eren, gaining some physical attributes and a super speed regeneration bone skill. The rest are rubbish. Strictly speaking, the super speed regeneration that Sha Chen drew should be a talent. Unfortunately, this is what is recorded on the plugin panel. As long as he activates it actively, he can make his bones grow rapidly. When the life return is developed to a high level, it can also be done, just like Luffy and the skeleton. The bones are broken, the teeth are lost, and drinking some milk can make them up, which is simply outrageous. But it's better than nothing. As for the others, it is not worth Sha Chen to continue to spend the collection times. His main goal now is the smoke fruit. By the way, in the original work, when Luffy officially set sail from Rogue Town, there were many good fruits. Then Sha Chen sentenced these guys to death by hanging. As for the attitude of the sea hero Jinbei, Sha Chen ignored him. If I say that Sea Knight Jinbei doesn't know about the evil things that Eren has done in the East China Sea over the years, I won't believe it. Chapter 31. Besides, isn't freedom what pirates pursue? If you need to worry about this and that when doing things, wouldn't it go against the true meaning of the pirate spirit? Of course, Sha Chen had sucked the rat colonel and others who were hung on the Navy cocoon ship dry before. Sha Chen just temporarily disabled them and soaked them in the water. He won't let them die, but they will definitely not feel good. He will take them to Rogue Town. Of course, on the way, Sha Chen recorded their numerous crimes by the way, and when he came back, he would make an extra copy of the video and hand it over to major newspapers in the East China Sea. I just don't know if they have the courage to expose these things. By the way, give them a copy of the World Economic News, too, and that Big News Morgans is likely to be interested. Gently tossing the Den Den Mushi in his hand, Sha Chen couldn't help but slap it. Speaking of which, this thing is another specialty of the One Piece world second only to the Devil Fruit and Domineering. Collection successful. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 10 points of spiritual power. Oh, my god, this shipment is a bit large. Sha Chen was quite surprised. Then when he looked at the Den Den Mushi again, it had already fallen off. So far, he has not had many people who have drawn more than 10 points of spiritual attributes from a certain person or creature at a time. And just now Sha Chen chose a Den Den Mushi, just one of the many ordinary Den Den Mushi. With this thought, he looked at the lower deck cabin of the warship, where there was a room dedicated to storing and raising Den Den Mushi. Of course, there were not many stocks in 16 branches, and there were only 3 in total, and the other 2 were video Den Den Mushi. But after looking at it, there were only 26 collection times left, and Sha Chen still secretly made up his mind to make a move. In addition, a new message just popped up on the panel. The collection times reached 100 times, and the level of the God level collection technique was upgraded. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 100 storage slots and opening the Skill Fusion function. Skill Fusion. Sha Chen had no doubts about the former, but he carefully checked the latter and simply summarized it into 2 aspects of ability. The first is to permanently fuse skills with similar properties into one, such as the spoon and the silent step that were only on the panel before. Take the essence of them. Although the level of the silent step has not been improved, the effective use has also been slightly improved. There is also the super speed regeneration bone that was just drawn before. After fusion with life return, this skill directly replaced to LV2, but he can feel that the life return at this time has been completely forcibly improved, and it still has great potential in bone recovery. As for the remaining ability, it is a temporary fusion. For example, he merged the domineering and water control skills, so the water flow he controlled naturally brought domineering, but the consumption still needs to be borne by himself, but the biggest benefit is that you don't have to be distracted and use it more. This direction has great potential. Although the temporary fusion does not reduce the consumption of physical and mental strength at all, this new ability is free of charge. I am totally blown away. A day passed quickly. On the afternoon of the second day, they were close to the waters of Rogue Town. Nami lowered a small boat hanging next to the Navy warship, on which was placed a large package and several orange trees. Sha Chen, come down quickly. Coming. Sha Chen left a few big words on the hull, jumped onto the boat, and then pushed the water flow, pushing the boat towards Rogue Town. It is not clear about Luffy's situation now, and it is not suitable to attract smokers' attention in a short time. It is best to get rid of him quietly. As for whether he is just or not, what does it have to do with me? I am a pirate. As Sha Chen expected, they successfully approached the port of Rogue Town and removed the Golden Mary, which had the pirate flag, like many inconspicuous sloops, quietly among a large number of ships. Observation Hockey. Open. Sha Chen used his observation hockey to check and found that there were people on the ship, but it didn't sound like Luffy and his friends. They wouldn't be so quiet. Wait a minute. Sha Chen stopped Nami, who was about to turn the rudder. What's wrong? Sha Chen. Nami suppressed the joy of seeing her friends and carefully hid in front of the orange tree. She wanted to make sure that if a battle broke out, she would at least not be a burden to Sha Chen. Let me see. Then Sha Chen controlled the water flow, condensed a pair of translucent eyes, flew to the deck of the Straw Hat Pirates not far away, and activated his observation haki to be alert to the situation around him. Soon they found the first person who heard something wrong. The other person was wearing a Marine's uniform and patrolling in the corridor on the second floor of the cabin. Navy. Luffy and his identity have been exposed, which is nothing to be surprised about. As long as they are not captured by Garp's old man. With Luffy's personality, it would be strange if he didn't cause trouble one day. There is no need to observe the rest, they must be Navy. Is this a trap? Then Luffy and his Luakin instinctively expanded the sensing range of his observation haki. Now he can easily cover an area with a diameter of 4 kilometers. It seems that he is almost the same as Garp, but Sha Chen is far from enough in terms of accurate tracking. It still takes time to practice, and he only persisted for 3 seconds before giving up. There are too many people in Rogue Town, including Navy, pirates, and bounty hunters. This observation haki cannot sense the strength of life. It is just a way of using the spirit through listening. So many voices suddenly flooded into his mind, almost causing Sha Chen's brain to crash. He also roughly figured out why Garp only controlled the detection range of 3 kilometers in radius, because that range can always keep Sha Chen within the perception range of this observation color, and at the same time can also discard unnecessary sounds. Learned it. What's the matter? Nami saw Sha Chen sighing for a long time, thinking that something had happened, and grabbed Sha Chen's sleeve and asked. It should be caught by the Navy. I'll go to the base to see. You. Sha Chen paused for a moment, and Nami's face changed slightly, but she didn't show off. The ship was also captured by them, right? You can leave this to me. Sha Chen opened his mouth and decided to give Nami a sense of participation. Okay, I will send a signal at that time. You will quietly approach now, and pay attention to conceal your identity. Although there is no wanted order for you now, this may be intentional by the Navy. Sha Chen said. After that, they made some simple preparations. And Sha Chen quietly walked to the sea and went to the dock, but before sneaking into the town, he hypnotized the dozen Navy on the ship with his hypnotic ability. This skill may not even work against someone like Zoro, but it is not a problem for these ordinary Marines, even if there is a sergeant-level existence among these Navy. Yes, I'm talking about you, Dashiki, but the gap between them and Sha Chen is too big now. In addition, this skill itself is very dependent on poor mental state. Before the official action, Sha Chen first took a short walk around Rogue Town. As expected, the execution rack in the town center square had collapsed and was charred, and no one had cleaned it up yet. Is Buggy coming to the door again? Apart from this, he couldn't think of anyone else who would have such a big grudge against Luffy and wanted to kill him directly. Of course, it was not absolute. After all, most pirates were not mentally stable. However, Buggy appeared, so did Aurita appear. Did she have an adventure? The slippery fruit is also pretty good. As for the split fruit, Sha Chen had long given up the idea that he shouldn't have. This domineering luck is not something that even the god-level collection technique can withstand. Then, according to the impression in the original book, Sha Chen went to several places, especially the knife shop. Sha Chen fooled the shopkeeper and the shopkeeper took out the snow. As for the third-generation ghost, Sha Chen did not leave it behind. Zoro can't use it, so it's good to keep it for yourself. Which time traveler doesn't have a collection? When Sha Chen finished checking the whole town, it was already evening and it was getting dark. While checking, he also checked the naval base in Rogue Town and accurately captured the location of Luffy, Zoro and others. It's underground. It looks like a dungeon-like building. Save people, or, Sha Chen hid himself in the shadow and looked at the top floor of the 5-story building in the naval base. That should be Smoker's colonel's office. At the same time, according to Sha Chen's detection, there are only a few people on the entire 5th floor. Keep it steady. Sha Chen changed his position, and then controlled a large amount of sea fog to pour into the dock and spread towards the direction of the naval base. Water escape hypnosis sleeping fog. This is the 7 days that Sha Chen stayed in the town of the number 16 branch base, combining the skills of water control and hypnosis to develop new moves that can be used to clear soldiers. Of course, when I awaken the Conqueror's haki, there is no need to be so troublesome. Before, I still needed to distract myself to control the rhythm, but now I have the fusion ability of the collection technique. In addition to consuming more, the operability is much stronger than before. Naval Base. A team that finished the evening training was going to the cafeteria for dinner. Suddenly, they saw a lot of fog pouring in from outside. They instinctively realized that something was wrong. In this season, there is fog, and it should be in the second half of the night. He reminded his companions, who said there was nothing strange about it. A few days ago, there was an inexplicable strong wind on the island, with lightning and thunder, and the execution rack of the Pirate King in the center of the square was also struck by lightning. These things are normal on the Grand Line, but they are rare in the Four Seas. Then they went about their business, but they still reminded them to close the windows and not let the fog enter the base and wet the important materials. But when the fog touched them, the Navy who spoke at the beginning yawned inexplicably. Strange, he muttered, and yawning is contagious, and the people around him did this one after another. But they still didn't take it seriously, and walked a few steps forward. A Marine fell to the ground and fell asleep on the spot. He knew why it was strange. Today's evening training didn't consume much, but it was very tiring, and they had received instructions from their superiors long ago to keep their combat status in good condition in the next few days, because something big was going to happen. In the end, he still neglected it. Moreover, with the knowledge popularization of the new unfamiliar colleagues who joined these days, he realized that this should be the same devil fruit ability as their Colonel Smoker. Of course, the negligence was mainly caused by the Marines in the East China Sea. Those elites began to forcibly resist sleepiness and fatigue, but Sha Chen's current mental value was nearly 700 points, and the gap during this period was too big. They wanted to resist, but most of them were hypnotized and fell asleep. However, the alarm of the base has been sounded. This is normal. Sha Chen has been activating his ability for a while, but he has noticed many things wrong with those local Navy officers in the East China Sea who are not good at acting, and then he did not rush in rashly. Realizing that this should be a trap set for himself, he even turned on the observation color and walked around the base. Still did not find the existence of a strong man like Garp. Until the alarm sounded, within his perception range, a large number of people gathered on the first floor, and a thick white smoke surged out from the first floor, blocking the water mist cage he summoned. It's over now. Sha Chen chose to charge head-on. White Fist. Sha Chen heard some giant creature passing through the mist and attacking himself head-on. After all, the water mist also affected Sha Chen's own vision. Sha Chen easily dodged 10 meters away. The next moment, a clear sound of drawing a sword came. When Sha Chen reacted, the man had already appeared in front of him. His pupils shrank. It turned out to be Garp's adjutant Bogart. It's bad. His blade was filled with a strong armed color domineering. Sha Chen used a hard plank bridge to barely dodge it. The latter followed up with a cassock slash and easily cut Sha Chen into 2 pieces. Then Sha Chen exploded and turned into a splash. Then the water splashed together not far away. At the same time, he also created 10 water clones and simulated their vibration frequency to that of his original body. It is indeed the natural system water fruit. Has it been elementalized in advance? And this trick is, Bogart has heard Vice Admiral Garp say it. I have to say that it is indeed very tricky and very restraining to the observation color. This Sha Chen has played the devil fruit to the fullest. But even so, under the current traps, Sha Chen must surrender, because the humiliation brought to Vice Admiral Garp, the Navy hero he admires so much, must be repaid with blood. Although Bogart is an adjutant, his rank is a real vice admiral, and his strength is also very strong among the vice admirals. It's just that he has always insisted on following the Navy hero Garp, and it is also a voluntary choice. Although Garp's personality makes him look down upon the celestial dragons. Even his adjutant and his subordinates often follow him, but Garp's personal charm is very strong, so no one has any complaints. Bogart used his observation hockey to shuttle back and forth in the thick fog. In a blink of an eye, he cut off 3 of Sha Chen's water clones. He soon appeared with 6 more, doubling his number. His style is the same as Garp's. He is good at single-player attacks, but he doesn't know how to attack in groups. Especially since Sha Chen, despicably, moved the unconscious Marines over. If he uses his ultimate move, he will most likely hurt them. The East China Sea is really a feng shui treasure land. Bogart couldn't help but sigh, and flashed back to Smoker's side. He had already felt that several Sha Chens were quietly surrounding him. Because the logic of their action trajectories is completely similar, it also makes it impossible to accurately identify the observation hockey, and the other party approaches Smoker so quickly, he must want to defeat the latter first. After all, Smoker's smoke ability is obvious, and it has an impact on the fog summoned by Sha Chen. Smoker, drive all this fog out. I'll try. Smoker's eyebrows twitched. He has been doing it all the time, but after the smoke he created was wetted by the sea water, the difficulty of controlling it rose sharply. The more smoke he created, the wider the area controlled, the greater the difficulty. He felt that he might not be able to win over Sha Chen in the competition of demon passing ability, but as the pride of the Navy, he did not allow himself to give up. He sucked the cigar clean in one breath, and then tried his best to drive the smoke towards the water mist created by Sha Chen. How could Sha Chen let him do what he wanted? Although this is land, because the establishment of a naval base must have an independent port, it is on the seashore. Sha Chen can easily mobilize more water. As the saying goes, in this sea, the ability to control water is simply invincible. If Sha Chen hadn't been afraid of summoning a tsunami and destroying the naval base, which would accidentally affect Luffy and others imprisoned in the underground prison, Sha Chen wouldn't have gone through so much trouble. As Sha Chen began to compete with him for territory, Smoker's pressure increased, and his eyes widened and turned red. Soon, all the smoke that he had pushed out of the building was pressed back, and the range of the smoke became smaller, and soon it was only confined to the lobby on the first floor. Bogart was like a ghost, and he had chopped off countless water clones. In fact, except for the first attempt to kill Sha Chen, he was holding back. It would be good for him to drag it on like this, but he couldn't let Sha Chen realize that the situation was wrong, and he couldn't stimulate Sha Chen to go all out directly. Because Admiral Aokiji would be here soon. Unfortunately, Vice Admiral Garp was led away by an unknown devil fruit ability user the day before yesterday, and he hasn't come back yet. That's right, the news about Vice Admiral Garp's departure that was leaked to the outside world was all false. This is a trap specially set for Sha Chen. And the strange problem of Vice Admiral Garp also needs Sha Chen to solve. They have used the energy of major branch bases in the East China Sea these days, but have not found a suitable solution. This is also the reason why they did not send the other members of the Straw Hat Pirates to the Grand Line impelled down immediately after capturing them. Of course, other reasons are not ruled out. A personal soldier like Bogart naturally knows that the captain of the Straw Hat Pirates is named Monkey D. Luffy, and he and their naval hero Garp are grandfather and grandson. I think Vice Admiral Garp doesn't want to send his grandson to impel down himself. But he knows that if he doesn't do something, Garp will still send people in the end. After all, his justice is the purest justice Bogart has ever seen. So Bogart has been thinking that after finding an opportunity to capture Sha Chen, he will let Luffy go. Anyway, they haven't done anything evil. The vicious incidents that happened before were mainly done by Sha Chen, and they have already found out the relevant situation. I can't make things difficult for Vice Admiral Garp. On the other side, Sha Chen was very dissatisfied with the advancement effect, and this Bogart seemed to be weaker than the one he saw that day. He forced himself to suppress his thoughts, and then drew a large amount of water from the sea. Instead of forming a tsunami, it was mixed in the mist and turned into rain. Water style. Rain cutting technique. Sha Chen vaguely remembered this ninjutsu that was rarely used in Naruto, and it was used on the devil fruit ability user, and it was indeed very effective. Smoker, who was suddenly drenched, wilted on the spot. What's going on? Not good. Sea water. Bogart immediately expanded his observation color, confirmed that the situation on the seashore was stable, and then he breathed a sigh of relief. Sha Chen was not so crazy yet. At that time, the other party condensed several waves over 50 meters high at the Bharati, the sea restaurant, and smashed their naval ships to pieces. The scene was vivid in his mind. Although they were elites and Vice Admiral Garp didn't need to spend a lot of energy to look after them, it also gave Sha Chen an opportunity to get close to Vice Admiral Garp. Later, Vice Admiral Garp chased Sha Chen alone, and they couldn't help at all. And there are the 7 warlords. This system should not exist in the world. Of course, it can't be said that Hawkeye didn't help at the time. After all, the other party also chopped twice, intercepted several tsunamis at the time, and caused chaos in the surrounding seas. Otherwise, even if Sha Chen just controlled the water flow and created a huge whirlpool, they would have suffered heavy casualties. The power of the sea is really awesome. Not only Smoker, but also 2 animal-type devil fruit users among the elites who participated in the siege were also suddenly enveloped. The seawater in the entire hall continued to surge and increase. Fortunately, the 2 animal-type fruit users were good at physical skills and had a high resistance to seastone components. Unlike Smoker, who lost all his fighting power on the spot. But this is not the end. Water droplets like bullets appeared from time to time in the rain, and Bogart was exhausted. In the end, he could only shrink into a small circle. He was like walking a dog, constantly consuming his physical strength, and the seawater in the entire building hall became more and more, almost flooding half of their bodies, and the 2 animal-type fruit ability users also wilted. They wanted to rush upstairs, but the water curtain had already blocked that place. Bogart wanted to rush out. He had already felt that Sha Chen was outside the first floor hall, but unfortunately there was no way. He could feel that this was a tacit understanding between the two. If he attacked by force, the intensity of the next battle would definitely increase sharply. Once Sha Chen set off a tsunami, it would definitely not be something he could resist alone. On the other side, in the dungeon below this office building, a drop of water suddenly fell from the ceiling made of huge stones above, and then it turned from a drop into a line, and soon it gathered into a number of water clones. The Marines guarding here heard the noise and immediately ran over to check. Unfortunately, Sha Chen had already gathered enough water flow. This dungeon was hidden enough, and it was defended against his demon story ability. However, his development of water control skills during this period was not in vain. Here, one sword flow draw the sword. A white light flashed, and Sha Chen was cut into 2 pieces on the spot. But the Navy did not feel lucky at all and pulled back. Unfortunately, it was too late. A water prison formed by the water flow on both sides trapped him tightly, and he fainted easily. More people came running. Their methods were not weak, but unfortunately none of them could use hockey. Perhaps Bogart felt that it was enough for them to stop Sha Chen from above. Although there were elite troops arranged below, they were useless without hockey. However, Sha Chen was not sure whether hockey could work on his water control skills. After all, except for the time when Sha Chen gave Garp a surprise, he did not confront Garp head-on. And to determine whether the armed color hockey had an effect on his skills, the premise was that Sha Chen had to be able to elementalize. After all, this water control skill was most likely an ability from the devil fruit, but he couldn't elementalize. Let's see if Smoker can give him a surprise. Even if these people were placed in the East China Sea, they would be an elite level of 5 or 6 million, but now Sha Chen really didn't have much. It took less than 5 minutes to knock them all to the ground. Defeat the Navy elite and get 3 collection times. Defeat the important plot character Smoker and get 15 collection times. What a pleasant surprise. Sha Chen's mouth curled up. He had used hypnosis to knock down many people before, but these people did not contribute to him once. The pattern of the number of times this god-level collection technique exploded became more and more unpredictable. It's not just Luffy and others who are imprisoned in the dungeon. There are many other pirates, so I randomly selected a few lucky ones and gave them the water gun, with strong penetrating power, but unfortunately no new collection times were exploded. Luffy, are you okay? Zoro's cell was just opposite Luffy. He saw Luffy lying on the ground like mud and asked with concern. "Ah, I'm so tired and hungry, I have no strength." Luffy had no sense of crisis at all, and he was still thinking about these at this time. It's over, it's over. Usopp was so scared that he could only repeat these words. I didn't expect that my dream of becoming a pirate would end like this. I couldn't help but blame Sha Chen in my heart. You can pick on anyone, why did you pick on Garp? I really want to smoke. Sanji just leaned against the wall, not knowing what he was thinking, but at this moment, they heard some fighting sounds. Someone came to save them. Who could it be? It was obvious. Zoro and Sanji immediately stood up, moved to the fence, and looked in the direction of the sound. As for Usopp, he squeezed his entire head out of the railing. And Luffy was still talking to himself about being hungry, hungry, and hungry. The fighting became more and more intense, and soon, he saw Sha Chen, who was wearing a Navy uniform, walking from the end of the dim corridor. Have you joined the Navy? Obviously, how dare you say such a thoughtless thing, Usopp? Then he looked at the embarrassed Zoro. Not only were his clothes torn in several places, but many places were also wrapped in bandages. It was obvious that he had experienced a tragic battle and was captured after losing. As for Sanji, his condition was not good either. His clothes were torn, his face was full of bruises, and his special shoes were lost. Luffy's condition was not good either. He still had a bandage on his head. Brothers, why are you so upset after not seeing each other for a few days? Sha Chen, I'm so hungry. Stop talking nonsense, let us out quickly. Zoro felt that he had lost face. The injuries on his body were caused by Bogart. Originally, he planned to challenge Bogart, the adjutant, first, and then challenge Garp. But he didn't expect that his ultimate move was useless. Except for a Wado Ikimonji, the other two knives had been chopped into pieces by this guy. For the first time, he also felt the power that could cut through steel that his master had mentioned. That is the so-called realm of a swordsman. He thought that if he was given some time, he would be able to comprehend it, but unfortunately he was now a prisoner. Okay. Sha Chen raised his hands. Although he seemed to be making fun of them, he was also trying to ease their embarrassment. He manipulated the water flow into the keyhole, pushed open the spring, and let them out. Even Luffy's seastone handcuffs were the same. Ah, the strength is back. Luffy stretched comfortably. Sha Chen, where have you been these days? Fortunately, he didn't ask for food directly, because Sha Chen was ready to punch him, although their window looked miserable now. It's all thanks to your grandfather. Let's talk about this later. Let's leave quickly. Zoro interrupted, and then he and Sanji each exerted force to bend the railing that stuck Usopp's head and let him out. After that, they walked towards the exit, passing by the navy that Sha Chen had defeated. Everyone was silent when they saw this scene. They couldn't help but ponder, is Sha Chen so powerful, or is the devil fruit ability so outrageous? Is it possible that physical skills, swordsmanship, alone can never catch up with the devil fruit ability user? Even Luffy, who has always been carefree, was silent. I don't know if it was a coincidence, but they also found Zoro's sword and Dao Ikimonji, Sanji's special black shoes, Usopp's slingshot and gunpowder packs, and Luffy's straw hat in the temporary storage room on the first floor of the basement. It was not until this time that Sha Chen was a little dazed. No wonder he felt that something was missing from Luffy before. It turned out to be this straw hat that was most important to him. And thinking that after the other party was rescued, the first thing he did was not to find the straw hat, but to ask about his situation, Sha Chen actually felt a sense of relief that the child had finally grown up. After each of them packed up their equipment, Zoro picked up 2 more weapons and put them on his waist. This is much better quality than what he used before. After all, it is also worn by the elite of the Navy headquarters. They followed Sha Chen all the way to the exit of the underground prison. No matter what you see later, you must keep quiet and follow me, understand? Sha Chen reminded. You are not the real body, right? Zoro asked. Yes, this is my fruit ability. I am still dragging them, so now we have to hurry up and leave. Those enemies are not what we can resist now. Sha Chen made it clear without any hesitation. Usopp nodded hurriedly and wanted to leave quickly. Sanji just smoked sullenly and said nothing. Luffy's face was gloomy, but he also did not mean to refuse. Then Sha Chen created a layer of water flow, shaped it along the shells of several of them, and simulated other vibration frequencies. When putting the shell on Luffy, he failed several times. First, the continuous control of so many clones has reached Sha Chen's limit at this time. If he wants to control more, he still needs some training. After all, this was just a simulated water-style ninjutsu through the power of water control, not a real ninjutsu. The separated water clones had no independent thinking of their own, and everything needed to be micromanaged by Sha Chen. On the other hand, Luffy was too disobedient. Wasn't he just wearing a shell? It was like he had ADHD. Moreover, the purified water he used did not contain seastone, so it would not suppress his ability. Fortunately, it succeeded in the end. Pushing open the iron door of the underground prison, the corridor on the first floor was outside, but it was already filled with thick fog, and it was difficult to see the scenery 1 meter away. Even breathing became more difficult and heavy. Sha Chen reminded them again to be careful and follow closely, and then he followed the instructions that had been given before, retreat along the route explored. As they got closer and closer to the lobby on the first floor, a sound of ding ding ding, like forging iron came. This was him using the kite-flying tactic to drag Bogart. He did not use Haki. So far, even his observation Haki has not been revealed in front of Garp. He still needs some time to develop. These tricks that can play a big role at critical moments must be kept secret. The reason why the water droplets can make a sound like metal collision when colliding with Bogart is because the sailor is wrapped in a lot of smoke and dust, especially Smoker had just used the ability of the smoke fruit, and the smoke and dust can be seen everywhere. The damage is not great, but it is extremely insulting. As Luffy and the others got closer and closer, the frequency of the raindrops, attacks became faster and faster, and then Bogart had less and less energy to take care of the situation outside. Sha Chen put all his mind on the two. Even the several clones maintained outside collapsed involuntarily. Ding ding ding. The sound of blades slashing and colliding almost became one, and Bogart had to put his observation Haki completely here. And just outside the thick fog 5 meters away from them, Zoro and the other two carried Luffy and shuttled quietly. The latter wanted to attack just now, but fortunately Sha Chen controlled him with seawater in time. Still did not get the number of collections, but now safe evacuation is the most important thing. One of the marine colonels who ate the animal system dog fruit husky form, the whole body was sore and weak, barely protecting himself, and suddenly sniffed his nose, as if he smelled some familiar smells. Sha Chen's observation Haki has been refrigerated in this area. Seeing this scene, he immediately changed the composition of some raindrops, and then the raindrops were cut open, and a large amount of chili powder, pepper powder, stinky tofu juice and other mixed smells instantly spread. Some of them were unable to dodge and fell directly into their eyes and noses. That was really sour to the extreme. Be careful, it's poisonous. Bogart thought that Sha Chen was just using these smells to cover up the poison. He swung his sword and cleared all the raindrops, but also shredded the pillars and walls of the entire first floor. In order to play the whole play and delay time as much as possible, Sha Chen really inserted the psychedelic drug found from base 16. Bogart and others, who had vaguely sensed something was wrong, felt the ingredients of these drugs. They became more concerned and resisted with all their strength. Until Sha Chen and others left the port. The water clones guarding the outside of the first floor exploded at the same time, and the sharp raindrops suddenly turned into a bucket, a large amount of water fell from the sky, and the fog began to dissipate. Bogart, Smoker and others realized that they were fooled. Bogart released his observation Haki immediately. When did this guy escape? Bogart's face changed drastically. Although he did have a little idea before, he was ready to send Luffy and the others away when the time was right. After all, the famous pirate Buggy and several other pirates who were more famous in the East China Sea were also captured before, but they were all sent directly to the Grand Line by warships. The purpose was to show outsiders how Garp and others returned to the Navy headquarters. After all, at that time, they had already activated all the intelligence and reconnaissance means in the East China Sea, but they did not find any trace of Sha Chen. In addition, the power in his hands was too dangerous. So they could only find a way to trap Sha Chen. Perhaps in the eyes of most people, such means used on Sha Chen were too incredible and too wasteful. But don't forget that the East China Sea, the weakest sea, is a template created by the Navy. In order to remind the rulers of the East China Sea countries, they did not hesitate to increase Sha Chen's bounty to 130 million baileys. The first time such a high bounty appeared was during the era of Pirate King Roger. After he was executed, the entire East China Sea was swept by Garp and the Navy. Pirates with more than 10 million were considered great pirates. So they had to capture Sha Chen or kill him as quickly as possible. To maintain the face of the Navy. Of course, another reason was that Garp's problem had to be solved. Once his current changes were exposed, it would probably cause a worldwide shock. But they didn't know how Sha Chen did it at all. It was clearly inferred based on a lot of information that Sha Chen's devil fruit ability was the natural water fruit. But he made Vice Admiral Garp look like that. It couldn't be the ability after the water fruit awakened, right? Besides, Sha Chen was relatively old, only 20 years old. Geniuses like the three admirals have only touched the threshold of fruit awakening. Of course, it is undeniable that the natural system is the most difficult to awaken compared to the other two systems. After all, their starting point is also very high. However, there are traces to follow in the awakening of the natural system. At most, he can control the waves in a larger range, or even turn the entire land into water for control, but this is really inconsistent with the ability he has displayed. So now there are two speculations. First, Sha Chen is actually a power fruit user of a certain animal-type fantasy beast. This is almost a recognized ability brought by the fantasy beast species among the high-level navy. It is an all-round improvement and the rarest part of all devil fruits. Second, Sha Chen is a multi-fruit ability user. Not many people know about this, and Carp and Marshal Sengoku are two of them. But no matter which one, they must catch Sha Chen. But now it is useless. The bait used to trap Sha Chen ran away, and Sha Chen seems to have run away too. Once they are on the sea, unless they can face Aokiji head-on, they will definitely not be able to escape. That's right. According to Mr. Garp's words, Luffy's next step is to go to the Grand Line, if Admiral Aokiji is blocking there. Brew brew brew. Ah, Bogart, don't rush me, I'll be there soon. A green mesh eye mask appeared on the head of the Den Den Mushi on Bogart's palm. Admiral Aokiji, where are you? I probably still have. The other side paused for a while, and then Aokiji's voice sounded outside the naval base, Ice Age. A lot of cold air emanated from him, covering the entire base, and the fog in the nearby blocks instantly changed from liquid to solid, turning into fine snowflakes, falling to the ground. The elite Marines lying everywhere outside the office building were also awakened by the cold one by one. Bogart tidied up his military coat, which was in disarray due to the battle, and looked at Smoker, who had recovered and took out 2 cigars and smoked non-stop. He waved to him and went out to greet Admiral Aokiji. Soon, a thin and tall figure of nearly 3 meters walked in from the gate of the naval base pushing a bicycle. He glanced at the base covered with snow all around. Ah, am I late? They should not have left too far, Admiral Aokiji. Bogart said. He thought he had discovered the problem in a long time, and then he released his observation hockey again to look for the Golden Mary. As a result, he used special techniques to expand more than 20 kilometers in a single direction, but still couldn't find it. How is this possible? What's wrong? Aokiji noticed that the other party's face changed and asked. Admiral Aokiji, they may have left the coast. Bogart said with a wry smile. Smoker, who had been standing aside as a background, suddenly thought of Tashigi and the others, and hurried out of the naval base and rushed to the dock. In order to set up this trap, they did not move the position of the Golden Mary. So the civilian dock and the military dock are not in the same direction. Bogart wanted to follow, but was stopped by Aokiji, who said, I can roughly guess some. Now tell me the specific situation, and the ability of that villain Sha Chen is really amazing. There has not been a pirate with more than 100 million Baileys in the East China Sea for many years. Quote. Yes, Admiral Aokiji. Quote. This is what happened, Bogart began to explain. Aokiji had only received a transfer order from the headquarters. He was on a mission in the New World at the time. After receiving the news, he directly crossed the windless era and rushed here. Although the most mobile of the 3 admirals is undoubtedly the flash fruit user Kizaru, the problem is that his ability is not enough to restrain Sha Chen. You have to know that he escaped from the hands of the Navy hero Garp. It is necessary to control him as soon as possible. Of course, the most important thing is to ensure that when the opponent recklessly uses large-scale destructive moves, it can be effectively blocked. Otherwise, if the opponent runs directly to an island and threatens the lives there, they are passive. It is okay if there are fewer people or non-member countries, but the key is that there are really many member countries in the East China Sea. After all, the environment is stable, and the speed of economic development will naturally increase. With more money, in order to protect the safety of property, most of them are very happy to become member countries of the world government. It turns out that it is not a natural system, but a kind of mythical beast fruit that can control water flow. Aokiji said. But Monkey D. Luffy is this name, right? What do you mean? That little kid named Luffy is Mr. Garp's grandson, right? Bogart was not surprised that Aokiji could guess this. In order to maintain Vice Admiral Garp's face, he said, Mr. Garp has made a decision to send him to Impelton on the way back. So strict, really worthy of Mr. Garp. Aokiji scratched his head when he heard this. He respected Garp very much. At the same time, he also felt that this matter was not without room for maneuver. After all, according to the current situation, the only one who really did evil in the entire pirate group was Sha Chen. Especially because he killed a Navy colonel. Although he was only a sub-base, and a fool who was hypnotized and teased, the dignity of the Navy was above everything else. Of course, this was just the most superficial of the many reasons listed before. So Aokiji thought Sha Chen could be caught, and as for the others, just teach them a lesson. After all, the justice he believed in was just lazy justice, and he had seen too much darkness in the Navy camp over the years. He was not like Akainu Sakazuki, who thought that all pirates deserved to die. By the way, is there any news about Mr. Garp now? Bogart's mouth twitched, and he didn't know how to answer. He used to be Aokiji's adjutant, and later became Garp's adjutant, so he knew the relationship between the two very well, and also knew a lot about Garp's family, such as the mysterious man who led Garp away, who was obviously Garp's good son. The world's most vicious criminal, the leader of the Revolutionary Army, Monkey D. Dragon. Whenever he thought of this, Bogart scratched his head. What was the situation with this family? However, he had also experienced Garp's training to some extent. From a certain perspective, he could understand why Garp's son and grandson were so rebellious and took a completely different path from Garp. Garp must have a lot of blame. It would be strange if there were no problems with his education method. But the problem is that after Garp became a hero of the Navy, he was not only the signboard of the Navy, but also his workload was increasing day by day. The Navy and the world government can be said to have used Garp's ability to the limit. Even Garp has learned the magical trick of sleeping while standing without a teacher. Aokiji understood Bogart's expression. What should be said has been said, so now he should think of a way to catch Sha Chen and the others back. Then he habitually released his observation haki, intending to see the situation on Smoker's side. But after this scan, he did not find the target person, and then not only narrowed the detection range to cover only the two docks, but also found a similar target. His face was serious, and his figure disappeared in a flash, stepping on the moon step directly to the civilian dock. Under the cold moonlight, he found Smoker and others lying unconscious on the ground. Smoker was almost stripped naked, and he looked very bad, and he looked very thin. His breath was weak, but he was a junior he was very optimistic about. Aokiji hurried over to check. Bluebird. He used ice to shape a huge ice bird, and then took Smoker and others lying at the entrance and in the alley, flew into the sky, and returned to the naval base. He immediately sent them to the medical room. What's going on? I don't know, I'll leave it to you here, I'll chase the enemy. Aokiji walked out of the camp with a sullen face, stepped on the moon step, and flew directly to the sea. He expanded his observation haki to the maximum, and the scenes with a radius of 20 kilometers appeared in his mind one by one. No, however, considering that the intelligence said that Sha Chen could control the water flow, it was normal for them to be far away from the coastline in a short time, so he chose the most likely direction and continued to track. Under the water, only 4 kilometers away from Rogue Town, a huge water ball is moving slowly forward. Zoro and the other 5 are standing on the deck, carefully guarding the surroundings. Although the water wall looks strong, it is 400 meters below the sea. Even with Zoro's physical fitness, once the water wall breaks, he will be slightly injured, or even seriously injured. After all, he doesn't know how to use haki yet. Without haki as a protection, it is a bit wishful thinking to use human flesh to fight against the power of nature. Puff! The sound came from the back of the sailboat, which scared Nami and Usopp. Everyone looked over and saw that it was Sha Chen who had left before. Now they can breathe a sigh of relief. With Sha Chen in charge, there is no need to worry about safety. Okay, the people have been led away, let's continue moving forward. Sha Chen did not wait for them to speak, and went straight to the deck. Nami, you take the helm, I will adjust the speed and sea current according to your instructions. Okay. Nami carefully observed the surroundings and calculated in her mind, the left side of the boat will deflect by 10 to 15 degrees, and the forward speed will be 5. Under Sha Chen's control, the water ball that was originally just roughly wrapped around the small boat slowly turned into a shuttle shape and began to rotate, and a new layer of giant spiral water guns appeared outside, forming a huge thrust, which rapidly increased the speed of the Golden Beauty. Not long after, it increased from the initial snail speed to more than 30 nautical miles per hour, and this speed is still increasing. Sha Chen sat directly beside the rudder, dividing part of his energy to sort out the things he had just collected. Fortunately, the backpack expanded 10 times, otherwise these things would be completely accumulated in front of his eyes, blocking his sight, just like when he first obtained the God-level collection technique. 20 draws, exchange for a golden skill, not a loss, but it's a pity that I didn't draw the elementalization. Quote. This investment ratio is already very large, but Sha Chen didn't dare to really beat Smoker to death. After all, he is not a pirate who does all kinds of evil. Besides, when Sha Chen was watching from a distance before, he saw the arrival of the Admiral Aokiji. Fortunately, he had already disguised the frequency and appearance of his body, temporarily fooled him, and directly threw 2 10 combos on Smoker, and ran away immediately. This collection obtained a total of 91 points of physical fitness, 52 points of spirit, a complete set of Navy Colonel uniforms, a 10-handed weapon of the opponent, and a Navy special supply, a box of cigars, some coins, and the most important new skill, high temperature. This is a pure gold skill, which means that in the judgment criteria of the audit collection technique, it is at the same level as the skill of controlling water. You should know that even the life return that Sha Chen collected before did not have the golden light special effect. Looking at the high temperature skill flashing with golden light in the storage compartment, Sha Chen was eager to absorb it, but he also knew that it was important to run away at this time. The Navy Admiral Aokiji was searching for their location. Although he was disguised, Sha Chen was not. If you can determine the frequency of your disguise, you will be able to 100% avoid the search of the Admiral of the Navy. You still have to be more stable. Of course, before, it was indeed to prevent Aokiji from going berserk. Sha Chen knew that Smoker had a good relationship with him, so he didn't beat Smoker to death. He knew very well that the whitewashed were 3 points weaker, and the blackened were 10 times stronger. Although this is already the real world, the development of the devil fruit ability and the domineering itself are positively correlated with the power of the spirit and the heart. When Aokiji returned to Rogue Town and brought back a Navy ship, the ship is the one at Base 16. Apart from this, no trace of Sha Chen and his men was found, and half a day had passed. It was obvious that this period of time was enough for Sha Chen and his men to escape. Of course, Bogart was not idle. On the other hand. He was afraid that Sha Chen and his men would come to the dark under the lamp. So he sent his men to search for Sha Chen and his men from house to house, and also caught a lot of pirates, as well as the small gifts that Sha Chen left for several newspapers. Bogart saw it and knew that Marshal Sengoku was going to have a headache. General Aokiji. The latter shook his head and looked at Smoker, who was still sleeping, through the glass window. General, the doctor has already treated it urgently. Colonel Smoker will not be in danger. Well, Bogart, you should prepare the ship immediately. I will take Smoker back to the Navy headquarters. Yes, Bogart immediately made arrangements. He knew that Smoker would not have an easy time in the next few days. He could not become a strong man just by relying on the power of the devil fruit. As for Sha Chen, it was because he was afraid to act rashly, and his power was too restrained to the devil fruit ability user. One day later, at a place called Gunkanjima, 500 kilometers away from Lugo town, the Golden Mary slowly emerged from the sea and found a suitable place to anchor. Everyone, I'm going to rest for a while. You guys are free to do whatever you want. At this time, Sha Chen's face was pale. Even though his current physical fitness had reached 612.3 points, he had gradually absorbed the physical fitness and mental attribute points drawn from Smoker. But it was also very consuming for him to control the water flow to surround the Golden Beauty and shuttle through the seabed. Moreover, he had just experienced a battle of great intensity before that. Don't worry, I will take good care of the ship. Deputy Captain, do you have anything to eat? I just want to rest now, and talk to you later. Sha Chen rejected Sanji's kindness and returned to the second floor with the help of Nami, his deputy captain's special cabin. Pushing open the door, a rare purple mane lion carpet was laid on the ground. After Sha Chen lay down, Nami hurriedly ran out to bring clean water and wiped Sha Chen. Sha Chen looked at him with a strange look on his face. Is this taking advantage of me? But he did not refuse. Although he had reached this level, controlling the water flow was as simple as eating and drinking. But this was Nami's good intention. Although Sha Chen refused, Sanji still brought Sha Chen a nutritious breakfast, which tasted very good. It happened that Sha Chen took a short rest. After waking up, he could not wait to integrate the newly acquired golden skill into his body. Unlike the last time, this time he could feel that ability integrated into his body and soul, and it was a very burning feeling. Even he couldn't help frowning and taking a breath. A minute later, this transformation was completed, which took more time than the last time, but he opened the panel and took a look. Most of the data remained unchanged, only a high-temperature LV1 was added to the skill. Is it what I thought? Sha Chen took the initiative to activate this skill. With the consumption of physical and mental strength, Sha Chen's right hand, which was gathered in front of his eyes, slowly changed color from the original bronze color until it became the color of a red-hot iron. At this time, the air around it was distorted by the high temperature. The wooden wall gave off a slight burnt smell. Sha Chen quickly cancelled it. Sure enough, but if this ability was collected from Charlotte Owen of the Big Mom Pirates, it would be possible. After all, the other party is the heat fruit ability user. But why did it come from Smoker? Although his smoke has temperature, it is only of general degree, and it can't even burn people. Could it be that the devil fruit system is complementary, and in the last life in the devil fruit system of One Piece, there is indeed the saying of upper and lower fruits? Sha Chen analyzed it and felt that he had grasped the core. In this case, if the smoke fruit can collect the skill of high temperature, or the characteristic, then the magma fruit and the flame fruit can also do so. In other words, the underlying logic of the superpowers in this world is just a few, such as earth, water, fire, wind, gold, wood, water, fire, and earth. It's a pity that I only read the Wano Country chapter and haven't followed the comics yet, otherwise I would know more information. Oh, and there is also the bloodline factor. A light flashed in his mind. In fact, whether it is water control, hypnosis, or the current high temperature, this kind of transformation is indeed from the inside out, and even makes Sha Chen feel that this ability has also transformed the soul. He thinks this is a modification at the genetic level. But this newly acquired ability is not easy to show directly. There will definitely be more crises in the future. Intelligence is above all else. Sha Chen thought, and began to try to merge the water control skill and the high temperature skill. It is not his style to not use it at all. He can mislead the enemy through some means. However, their compatibility is very low, and there is no way to merge them permanently. The simplest one that can be created by temporary fusion, even hot steam, allows Sha Chen to see the feasibility of confronting Aokiji head-on. The temperature of steam is higher than that of boiling water. Of course, for Aokiji who can easily freeze a large area of the sea, it is still far from it. But there is a simple physical common sense that when the temperature is high, the activity of most particles will increase, so can I create hydrogen fusion? Ah, it's a bit far-fetched, but Sha Chen thinks it is indeed possible. After all, he just tried it before, and he asked me to raise the temperature to nearly 1000 degrees, and there was still energy left. Of course, the higher the temperature, the greater the consumption of his physical and mental strength. This is definitely a positively correlated process. In any case, this all good news. Sha Chen slowly waited for his physical strength to recover while narrowing the scope of the experiment. The effect was very good. Not long after, he developed the secret technique of the second-generation Mizukage in Naruto, such as the steam explosion. Although he could not make the oil layer, he could directly control the temperature. And the effect was even more outstanding. When it was almost night, Sha Chen's physical strength was almost recovered. He went out for a walk and found that only Nami and Zoro were on the ship. The rest of the people ran to the battleship island. Seeing this island that looked like a multi-layered warship, Sha Chen thought of some related plots. He stood on the deck and looked at it. If he remembered correctly, it seemed to be the cemetery of the Millennium Dragon, but now the timeline has been disturbed by Sha Chen. I don't know if I can run into the old Millennium Dragon. And if I collect from the Millennium Dragon, can I collect useful things? Although there is a local legend that as long as the blood and bones of a 1,000-year-old dragon are ground into powder and made into medicine, one can achieve immortality, but Sha Chen certainly does not believe it. If this is really possible, the world government would have killed all the 1,000-year-old dragons in the world long ago. So, this should be just some rumors. He couldn't help but look at the panel. He signed in once yesterday, and now he has collected 25 times in total. Just try it. 1 or 2 times is nothing. The battles in the past 2 days made Sha Chen clearly realize the gap between himself and the world's top strongman. He wanted to become stronger more urgently. Sha Chen, are you okay? Nami, who was sorting out the sea charts in the room before, saw Sha Chen's figure from the window and ran out. It's okay, I wasn't injured, Sha Chen said with a smile, and then asked about the movements of others. Sure enough, Luffy was restless and went on an adventure again. Even Usopp was fooled away by him. As for Sanji, because there was indeed not enough food on the ship, he went to the island to replenish it. It has been half a day since they set out, and there is no movement on the island, so it should be fine. Sha Chen nodded, and then said that he was going to go to the sea to catch some fish. It has been several days since he tasted Sanji's cooking. Although Sanji had just cooked for him today, Nami did not suspect anything. Sha Chen controlled the water flow to wrap himself up and plunged into the sea. It didn't take much time for Sha Chen to find the cemetery of the 1,000-year-old dragon. There is a very magical thing, even on the seabed, there is no seaweed, coral or other things growing on their bones. Here, more than 50 meters, no wonder. Even if the people in the One Piece world have special physiques, they will not easily go 50 meters underwater to explore the situation. At most, they will move around in the near sea. This is really a dark place under the lamp. Sha Chen picked and chose the one with the largest size. According to the situation mentioned in the plot, these fossils have been on the seabed for at least 1,000 years. Sha Chen, a 1.85-meter tall man, stood in front of it like a little baby. Back off. The driving ability completely pushed away the seawater around the petrified Millennium Dragon, and the water on its surface was also drained to ensure that it would not affect his collection technique. In the past, Sha Chen would draw pure water in the lottery. He estimated that it was related to his ability to bind the target. Soon, with the Millennium Dragon as the center, a dry area with a radius of 20 meters appeared. Sha Chen walked around the 1,000-year-old dragon stone statue twice, stretched out his hand and knocked it, making a very dull sound. It looked like an ordinary rock. Before collecting, Sha Chen thought for a while, condensed a spiral water blade with extremely strong cutting power, and drilled down along the surface of the 1,000-year-old dragon stone statue. Unfortunately, even if Sha Chen penetrated the wing he chose, the inside was still made of stone. It's really weird. Sha Chen had seen dinosaur fossils in his previous life. He knew the difference between fossils and ordinary stones, but after the 1,000-year-old dragon was petrified, the stone material inside and outside was exactly the same. It was just because of some unknown reason that they were given life, and then when a certain time point, they returned here and died. No, it should be called reincarnation. Sha Chen thought about it carefully, and some of the content in the plot was a little unclear. Collect once. Collect successfully. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the skill. Reincarnation. A bright and rich golden light suddenly appeared in front of Sha Chen. Although only he could see it and it was impossible to reflect it in the real world, Sha Chen still felt that his eyes were pierced by the golden light. How is this possible? Sha Chen was full of doubts. Am I dazzled? But after a series of fine clicks, the huge statue in front of him completely collapsed. Are you kidding? Sha Chen squatted down, took out some dust with his hard hands, and crushed it. This was finer than the finest glutinous rice flour he had ever seen. Immediately following was a strong excitement. He looked at the hundreds of thousands of huge 1,000-year dragon statues around him with fiery eyes. As before, he came to a statue again. Although he had not yet integrated the reincarnation skill into his body and was not sure of its ability, reincarnation was a powerful ability at the rule level no matter which world it was placed in. And I don't know if it's my illusion, Sha Chen always feels that the golden light wrapped around the skill of reincarnation is richer and brighter than those I encountered before. Of course, there are also various doubts in my mind. Although the Millennium Dragon is an original creation of the animation, it has appeared now, so it is impossible to be aimless, especially now that this has become a real world. There must be some connection, but the legend of the Millennium Dragon seems to be limited to the vicinity of Gunkanjima. The Millennium Dragon flies back once every 1,000 years, so where did they live in these 1,000 years? Sky Island. This has always been the most likely for Sha Chen. After all, how many Sky Islands there are in the sky, even Sky Island people can't tell. After all, Sky Islands are big and small, and the movement trajectories of most Sky Islands are illogical. Unfortunately, the previous reincarnation seems to have overdrawn Sha Chen's good luck, and he collected 10 statues in a row. In addition to the Millennium Dragon fossils and old rocks, there is no other harvest. This is the lowest point of my luck. Forget it, let's just leave it at that. Samsara, I want to see what effect you have. Sha Chen suppressed his worries and looked back at the remaining 1,000-year-old dragon petrified statues of various sizes. He turned around and left here, casually caught a few rare big fish and threw them into the kitchen. Then he returned to his room and could not wait to integrate this skill into his body. When this skill was integrated into the body, it was different from before. It kept changing between extreme cold and extreme heat. Even Sha Chen was suffering. He fainted directly because his spirit could not bear it. Hiss, Sha Chen woke up from his deep sleep. Why did he feel a little pain in his body? Forget it, let's talk about the Samsara skill. In the process of integrating this skill, he already understood the function of this skill. It has to be said that it is amazing. It is exactly the same as he imagined before. This skill cannot be used on the outside world, but can only be used on oneself. Sha Chen can use his own all physical and mental strength to live again. This is the resurrection coin. Although it can only return to the baby state, the plugin is not affected. The only disadvantage is that this skill has a cooling time of 1,000 years. It really fits the saying of the Millennium Dragon. But this made Sha Chen even more confused. At this moment, his voice woke up Nami, who was lying on the side of his bed. The light hanging on the top of the cabin swayed slightly. It was obviously already on the sea. No, I didn't sleep for a long time, did I? Sha Chen, you finally woke up. Nami was overjoyed. Her face was ugly and full of fatigue. There was a layer of light dark circles under her eyes. This girl, how long has she been guarding? Nami stretched out her hand and waved it in front of Sha Chen. Sha Chen was dizzy and reached out to grab her little hand. The latter twitched twice and then stopped moving, then tears rolled down. Sha Chen, are you okay now? What happened? No, how long have I slept? Sha Chen sat up from the bed, his body stiff and a little numb. He stretched out his hand and rubbed his slightly swollen head. This was the sequelae of sleeping too long. Fortunately, with his current spirit and physique, he would recover soon. He opened the panel, and the data on it remained basically unchanged, except for a new skill, reincarnation. That is, the number of draws, 10 more times. A full 10 days and 10 nights. Quote. Sha Chen pretended to be surprised, and then a strong feeling of hunger came over him, and his stomach made a gurgling sound, which made the corners of his mouth twitch constantly. Has my physique reached the monster level? After 10 days without food or water, I was able to wake up. Nami didn't think there was anything wrong. After all, after getting on the ship, she had more or less heard her companions talk about the past stories. Whether it was true or not, Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji all had monster-level physiques. Although their current strength is not as good as Sha Chen, their potential is great. I'll go prepare food for you. Although Nami wanted to stay with Sha Chen for a while, Sha Chen's satisfaction was the first priority. As soon as she opened the door, she shouted Sanji's name at the top of her voice. Then Sanji ran out from nowhere in a hurry, knelt on one knee perfectly, and his eyes seemed to be full of peach hearts. Miss Nami, may I ask how I can help you? Sha Chen is awake, hurry up and cook, and bring all the delicious food. This was a critical hit for Sanji, who was developing the spirit of chivalry towards the direction of licking dogs. I'll be there soon, Miss Nami. But he knew the priorities of things. During the days when Sha Chen was unconscious, they deeply realized the insufficiency of their own strength. Facing thousands of Marines, they could only be chased by others, which was totally different from Sha Chen, who could fight a naval base alone. You should know that the navy that relies on the naval base for combat, even if the number of people is less than 1,000, the combat effectiveness is far better than that on the sea. Besides, the naval base that Sha Chen confronted head-on in Rogtown was not comparable to the garbage navy that they met a few days ago, who claimed to be the admiral of the navy. Although their warships look no different from the mainstream navy, and even have some more expensive and distinctive decorations. But Sanji thinks that some nearby country should have reached some agreement with the navy. The navy built by our own people, or the branches of the navy set up in these places, have been eroded. At worst, as a highly profitable organization, it is nonsense to have a person with low strength and even inconvenient movement as the head. There are 200 or 300 naval bases in the East China Sea alone. Even if Marshal Sengoku, who has eaten the animal system human fruit phantom beast Big Buddha form, has reached a perfect level in mind, body, and skills under the special ability of the fruit, he still can't handle the chores of these branches. At the same time, don't forget that the navy is just a tool of the world government. Therefore, except for the navy of the Grand Line and the New World, the composition of the navy of the other 4 seas has long been extremely complicated. Soon the news of Sha Chen's awakening spread throughout the ship, and Zoro, Luffy and others also came to visit Sha Chen. Even Usopp was lying at the door and watching quietly. When he was sure that Sha Chen did look like he had a good appetite, he suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. They had been chased badly these days. Sha Chen was also talking to Nami and the others. As for Luffy, he was trying to grab his food. From time to time, he was knocked unconscious by Nami's punch, and then woke up to continue grabbing. Sanji kept making delicious food. Sha Chen's appetite has become very good now. At the same time, he has also mobilized the ability to return life and stored more energy in his body. But the most important thing is that Sanji's craftsmanship is really not exaggerated. Hearing that they had experienced the Millennium Dragon incident, Sha Chen felt lost for a while, but thinking that he had ended up like this because of a rule-level god-level skill, he could only sigh that there is a destiny in the dark. Besides, even if he caught a living Millennium Dragon, he couldn't collect it openly, and the Millennium Dragon would leave soon. Unless he chose to part ways with the Straw Hat Pirates, otherwise, the Straw Hat Pirates would definitely not agree if he took action directly. Besides, the only things that can be collected from the living Millennium Dragons are some physical and mental attribute points, and the fur. I'm dead, I'll have another reincarnation skill. But now I already have it, and the two together can be directly upgraded to LV2, oh my god, what should I do if I suddenly feel a little excited? Where did they fly to? Unfortunately, Luffy and the others don't know this question. Sha Chen can only put it aside for the time being. There is another thing that makes Sha Chen a little confused, that is, he made a lot of noise in Rogue Town, and now everyone on the ship has their own bounty wanted. As the captain, Straw Hat Luffy, the bounty is 30 million Baileys, regardless of life or death. Just like the original pirate hunter Roronoa Zoro, the bounty is 15 million Baileys, regardless of life or death. Blackfoot Sanji, the bounty is 12 million Baileys, only allowed to be captured alive. Slingshot Boy Usopp, bounty 3 million berries, life or death. Little Thief Cat Nami, bounty, 4 million berries, life or death. Villain Sha Chen, bounty 130 million berries, life or death. Yes, the bounty has not changed. At the same time, during this period, in addition to encountering the huge naval force that claimed to be the admiral of the navy, they also encountered navies from other sub-bases, but most of them were just feints, and it was clear that they were driving the Straw Hat Pirates to the Grand Line. Sha Chen analyzed it and felt that his bounty in the East China Sea should have reached the top. If it was increased, it would affect the layout of the navy in the East China Sea. Driving them to the Grand Line can not only take advantage of the harsh environment and the increasingly powerful pirate group to fight against the Straw Hat Pirates. At the same time, in terms of straight line distance and control range, it is much more convenient than crossing the doldrums to reach the East China Sea. The efficiency of the Navy's execution will be higher. Moreover, they have not blocked the twins yet, waiting for Sha Chen and his men to fall into the trap. They probably think they can't block it. After all, with Sha Chen's ability, Crossing the calm belt is risky, but the chance of success is not low. Rather than letting others suddenly appear from nowhere and cause a big trouble, it is better to put it under their noses. Of course, this is just Sha Chen's own analysis. Whether there are other reasons, Sha Chen cannot judge due to insufficient information. However, he reviewed the newspapers in recent times. No news of collusion between the Navy and pirates of Base 16 was found in either the East China Sea or the World Economic News. It is obvious that the world government suppressed it. Come to think of it, this is a huge scandal of the Navy, and it also involves the fishmen. Although there are some connections, everyone in the system knows that the Navy is not as honest as they think, they are just the running dogs of the celestial dragons. But ordinary people don't know. And the largest number of people in this world are ordinary people, and the highest proportion of people who go out to sea to become pirates are also ordinary people. They may be oppressed or unable to survive for various reasons. Of course, there are also those who simply want to go out to sea to plunder, and some countries even raise pirates specifically. This is a bit like the shadow of the so-called maritime powers in the 14th and 15th centuries of Sha Chen's previous life, who let the Navy disguise as pirates to plunder other countries. Sha Chen always felt that Oda's inspiration should come from here. At this moment, Nami, who was looking at Sha Chen with waves, suddenly changed her expression, got up and went to the window and looked outside. The sky was slightly gloomy, but there was no other movement. Nami opened the window, and a very weak wind blew in, with a strong smell of the sea and a little bit of stinking. "We're here." "What?" "Ah." Except Sha Chen, everyone else looked at Nami in confusion. These days, they have fully realized how pleasant it is to have a talented navigator on board. So everyone subconsciously stopped caring about the route, but seeing Nami's faintly solemn expression, they all set off and went to their respective posts, some to reef the sails, and some to steer the rudder. Sha Chen was no exception. He stood beside Nami. After about half an hour of moving forward, the sky became more gloomy, the entire cloud layer was about to press down on the sea, the waves were surging, and a huge ocean current could be seen from afar, rising into the sky and climbing up the red soil continent surrounding the entire One Piece world. It was magnificent and deafening. Even though it was estimated that there were still more than 10 kilometers here, the sound was still like thunder rumbling in the sky. The air became more and more humid, and after entering a certain range, the air was covered with water mist, gradually turning into drizzle and heavy rain. The appearance of the climbing sea current was more clearly displayed in front of Sha Chen. Even if Sha Chen had seen the Hukou waterfall in his previous life, he had never been so amazed by such a spectacular sight. Sure enough, this kind of creation of nature cannot be described in animation. "Everyone, let's have a sailing ceremony." Luffy smiled and jumped from his exclusive sheep head seat to the deck. The rain fell on him, but it still did not reduce his pride and enthusiasm in his heart. There is no doubt that there must be sea stone in this water. Everyone smiled at each other, and Usopp rolled an oak barrel from somewhere. As the captain, Luffy was naturally the first one. He stepped on the oak barrel and shouted loudly, "I, Monkey D. Luffy, am the man who will become the Pirate King. I want to be a brave sea warrior. I want to be the world's greatest swordsman. I want to find all blue. I want to draw sea charts all over the world." Everyone was very excited, and finally everyone looked at Sha Chen. Sha Chen came up to him wearing his white anti-sea wind coat and stepped on the oak barrel. "I want to be a pond owner." Huh, everyone was confused. In fact, they had thought of many possibilities in their minds before, but they didn't think of the pond owner. Even though the words, "pond owner," were sewn on Sha Chen's coat, these two words had no explanation in this world. Nami asked Sha Chen, and Sha Chen just smiled slightly. After all, if this thing is explained clearly, it is easy to get beaten. What is a pond owner, Sha Chen? Usopp felt that this was something extraordinary. And as a travel ceremony to the Grand Line, this is very meaningful to their Straw Hat Pirates. This is to let the companions on the same ship understand that after hearing each other's wishes, they will do their best to help their companions realize their dreams, so they will also help Sha Chen realize this dream. Just figure it out first. Pond Master, that is the ultimate dream of every man, but you only need to know that it requires strong strength and financial resources as a foundation. Everyone was thoughtful, and Luffy said, "So it's for treasure." He naively said that when he found One Piece, he could give his share to Sha Chen. Sha Chen smiled and nodded. After all, in everyone's eyes, One Piece is the treasure accumulated for a lifetime left by the previous pirate King Roger. The sailing ceremony is simple, but not simple. Because after listening to the dreams of the companions, everyone naturally has a responsibility in their hearts beyond working hard to realize their dreams. Then Luffy returned to his exclusive seat with a laugh. Little ones, let's set sail. Oh, everyone cooperated very well and took their own positions. This time, Sha Chen was in charge of steering the ship. After all, this mountain climbing current was extremely powerful, and Nami's small body might not be able to withstand it. At the same time, standing in this central position, he could also use the water current to protect the ship in time. Nami's talent is not to be underestimated. Under his command, she stepped onto the mountain climbing current smoothly. The ship began to bump, and the sails that had been untied were blown away by the strong airflow, causing the entire hull to capsize to one side. Sha Chen summoned the water flow quickly to cover the entire ship, greatly weakening the roar outside. Then they finally entered the mountain climbing current channel of the Grand Route. 10 square gates like dragon gates appeared in front of Sha Chen, with complex patterns carved on them, mostly with carvings of marine creatures. At this moment, a lot of information flashed through Sha Chen's mind, such as the Great Kingdom, the Sea King, the Pluto, the King of Heaven, the Celestial Dragons, the World Government, the 5 Elders, I Am, the 4 Emperors. Through this road is a new world. Because of Sha Chen's assistance, the process of climbing the mountain this time was not as dangerous as in the original book. Instead, the group looked at everything around them very comfortably. Although there was no amazing scenery, this kind of experience might only happen once in a lifetime. Finally, they climbed to the top of the upside-down mountain. The ocean currents from 4 directions converged here into a huge vortex. Sha Chen raised his eyebrows. This did not appear in the original book, but it was quite in line with the rules of ocean current operation. And the situation is not just that. Several pirate ships also climbed up in the direction of the West Sea. When they saw Sha Chen and others climbing up from the East China Sea, they opened fire without saying a word, and black lead bullets flew over. Be careful. Sha Chen, I won't break your barrier, will I? Rubber rubber. Everyone began to accumulate strength to help the Golden Mary pass through this pass smoothly. Even Usopp suppressed his trembling body, took out his slingshot, and aimed at the flying shells. Just watch, everyone. Sha Chen smiled, and then the already thick water barrier suddenly rotated, throwing out the diversion water gun, knocking these shells away or blasting them in the air. At the same time, Sha Chen applied a thrust to the rear of the Golden Mary, and a sky-high waterway suddenly appeared. It dragged the entire Golden Mary into the sky and past the entire whirlpool. Ah, woohoo. This thrilling scene scared Nami and others to scream or laugh. Especially Nami. Whether intentionally or unintentionally, she subconsciously hugged Sha Chen's waist even though she knew it was an emergency, buried his head on his back. With Sha Chen's current control of the power of water control, even if he has not reached the level 3, there is no problem in building a bridge to the sky, so they fell into the channel of the downhill current without any danger. Then Sha Chen looked back and saw the pirates who had just entered the whirlpool and were ready to choose a channel. With a thought, a large amount of water mist rose up and covered the entire whirlpool. Ah, it's so hot. Jump off the boat. A series of screams rang out, because this time the water mist was not ordinary mist, but hot steam. Although it was very high, the temperature still reached a terrifying 150 degrees Celsius under the control of Sha Chen's skills. These pirates were caught in a panic by the sudden attack, and then the ship was destroyed and people died soon as expected. Everyone looked at this scene without saying anything, but quickly turned their attention back to the front, because the Red Earth continent is 10,000 meters high, and they can see far away from here, as if the clouds are under their feet. After passing through the clouds, there are sparkling waves and sunshine, which are completely different from the other end of the Grand Line. Do you think we have missed Raftel? Sha Chen suddenly brought up this topic. Raftel, like Op, has spread completely in the pirate world. Everyone knows that the treasures of the Pirate King are stored on an island called Raftel. Sha Chen, what are you talking about? This time, not only Nami, who was very close to him, but the others were also shocked. Even Luffy's neck was twisted into a knot and looked at Sha Chen. Sha Chen controlled the ship in the center of the channel and said slowly, "Everyone says that One Piece is the first person in the world to complete a circle of the Grand Line, and Raftel where One Piece is located is at the end of this route, but imagine that the world we are in is a ball. If we had turned back directly when we reached the top and climbed down from the Red Earth continent, wouldn't we have reached the end of the Grand Line? If Raftel is not here, where is it?" This made everyone silent at once. It makes sense. Raftel cannot be found so easily. What we can think of, others can naturally think of, but it has not been found until now, so the location of Raftel may not be just the end of the route. Nami said. Zoro, Sanji and others also nodded frequently after hearing this. They were just shocked just now, but this analysis made this statement a little untenable. Wait a minute, what are you talking about? How can this world be spherical? Luffy was stunned, and Zoro was also confused. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.